Do you ever think about those 1980s things you completely forgot shaped your childhood until someone mentions them and it all comes rushing back? These were the items, sounds, and moments woven so deeply into daily life that they felt invisible. So what memories have been waiting quietly for you to rediscover them? Off-brand chips in oversized bags appeared at every holiday gathering where feeding a crowd mattered more than impressing anyone with fancy logos or recognizable packaging. The bags were enormous, puffed with air and filled with rippled or plain potato chips that tasted almost identical to the famous brands, but cost half as much at the register. Parents poured them into serving bowls without the original packaging visible anywhere nearby, and guests reached for handfuls without ever asking where they came from or noticing any difference. The crunch was right, the salt was right, and the satisfaction was exactly what people expected from chips at a party. Kids grabbed fistfuls during holiday movie marathons, leaving greasy fingerprints on remote controls and couch cushions without a care in the world. The bags lasted longer than name brands because there was simply more product inside, and leftovers stayed fresh enough in the pantry for days afterward. Nobody bragged about buying off-brand chips, but nobody apologized for them either. They did exactly what they were supposed to do, filling bowls and filling bellies while leaving money in the budget for things that mattered more to the family. Christmas morning started before the sun came up. You opened your eyes at 5 a.m., heart pounding, adrenaline surging. You crept to your siblings' room. You whispered, "Are you awake?" They were. Everyone was. You tiptoed to the top of the stairs. You peeked. And then came the voice from your parents' room. "Go back to bed." Those 4 words were torture. You were so close. The tree was right there. The presents were waiting. But the rule was the rule. No presents until everyone was awake. And awake meant your parents had coffee and at least one functioning eye open. You waited. You counted ceiling tiles. You tried to fall back asleep and failed completely. Sometimes you played a game. Guess what's in each box based on shape and weight. Sometimes you just stared at the clock, watching the minutes crawl like hours. When the signal finally came, okay, you can come down. You launched yourself down the stairs like a rocket. That moment, that first glimpse of everything under the tree, was the whole point. You only got that feeling once a year, and nothing since has ever quite matched it. Pound puppies were the stuffed animals everyone wanted to rescue and take home. With their droopy eyes and soft fur, they were designed to tug at your heartstrings. Parents loved that they taught kids empathy and responsibility, until reports surfaced about an unexpected danger. The problem was in the hard plastic eyes, which were poorly secured and prone to popping off. For toddlers, those small pieces became choking hazards in an instant. Several incidents led to recalls and redesigns, with softer, stitched-on eyes replacing the hard ones. Despite the scare, pound puppies remained beloved, a symbol of comfort during the bright chaos of the 1980s. They were innocent, cuddly, and full of nostalgia, even if they came with a side of hazard. For many families, the memory of falling asleep with one still outweighs the fear that once surrounded them. The danger faded, but the affection never did. In the 1980s, decorative clock radios made from crushed natural stone looked like the height of modern style, a perfect blend of nature and technology sitting right beside your bed. The idea was simple. Take powdered mineral stone, bind it together, shape it into a sleek shell, and build a clock into it that felt earthy and futuristic at the same time. But hidden inside these polished surfaces was something no one expected. Some of the minerals used in these clocks emitted low levels of radon gas, a danger that could quietly accumulate in the still air of bedrooms where families slept every night. At the time, no one questioned this. People bought them proudly, admiring their weight, their rugged textures, and how different they looked from plastics that dominated the era. They became popular gifts, decorations, and bedside companions for kids and adults alike. For many households, these clocks were among the first things seen each morning and the last things seen each night. It took years before researchers began connecting unusual radon readings in homes with decorative items no one suspected. When the truth surfaced, it came with unsettling clarity. Suddenly, a stylish product meant to bring comfort and personality into bedrooms, instead symbolized an invisible danger drifting through the air. Families boxed up clocks they once adored, unsure what else in their homes might be quietly affecting their health. And today, these stone clock radios remain one of the most unnerving reminders that even the calm glow of a bedside clock can hide risks that take decades to fully understand. Hexachlorobenzene, treated grain products, made their way into bread, cereal, and pasta throughout the 1980s after the fungicide was used to protect wheat and other crops from disease during storage. Farmers valued its effectiveness against seed-borne infections that could devastate entire harvests, and processors assumed residues would be negligible by the time grains reached consumers. Families ate these products daily, building meals around bread, pasta, and breakfast cereals without any awareness of what chemicals might linger inside. The fungicide seemed like a necessary tool in modern agriculture, protecting the food supply from threats that had plagued farmers for generations. But hexachlorobenzene proved far more persistent and dangerous than anyone initially believed. Mass poisoning events in other countries had already demonstrated its devastating effects on human health, causing liver damage, skin lesions, and neurological problems. When regulators finally connected these risks to agricultural use, the chemical was banned globally. The grains that once seemed like simple staples carried contamination that took decades to fully understand and eliminate from the food chain. There was a time when cigarettes were as much a part of home decor as the coffee table itself. The 1970s were filled with television ads and glossy magazine spreads showing happy couples laughing in smoke-filled living rooms, perfectly lit with mid-century lamps. Cigarettes weren't just sold as a habit, they were sold as a lifestyle, one of class, comfort, and connection. Homes were designed to accommodate it. Ashtrays sat like centerpieces, sometimes ornate, sometimes shaped like leaves or glass sculptures. Smoke stands gleamed beside armchairs, an open invitation to light up after dinner. The haze of tobacco was as familiar as the hum of conversation. But beneath that glamour lay danger that no one wanted to see. The air thickened with toxins, settling into carpets, drapes, and lungs. Children breathed it nightly as their parents smiled and exhaled under the illusion of sophistication. Companies knew the truth long before the warnings appeared. Internal memos revealed they understood the cancer risk, but masked it behind slogans of freedom and relaxation. Cigarettes became symbols of modern living, tools of escape that quietly destroyed the very health they celebrated. By the time the public caught up, homes were steeped in secondhand smoke, their walls yellowed with residue. It is eerie now to think that families once designed living spaces around a habit that was slowly poisoning them. The cigarette ad era may have burned out, but its smoke still lingers in memory, a reminder of how style and danger once shared the same breath. The artificial tree was a family project. It came in 3 sections, each labeled with a color, red, green, and blue. Or maybe it was A, B, and C. Either way, it took an hour to put together and twice as long to figure out why one section would not light up. You dragged the box out of the attic, you unfolded the branches. Each branch had to be fluffed, bent outward to look full and natural. You fluffed for what felt like days. Your hands hurt. The fake needles poked. And no matter how much you fluffed, there was always a bald spot somewhere that required creative ornament placement. The pole never quite fit. You twisted, you shoved. You prayed the whole thing would not collapse when you let go. Some trees came pre-lit, which sounded like a miracle, until one strand went out and you had to find the dead bulb among 300. Real tree families judged you. They had pine needles and sap and the smell of a forest. You had plastic and convenience. But your tree lasted 20 years. It came out every December, slightly more bent than the year before, and it still sparkled. Because Christmas was not about perfect, it was about tradition. And that tree was family. Shrinky Dinks were marketed as a harmless art project, a way for kids to draw, color, and then watch their creations magically shrink into hard plastic charms. What no one mentioned at first was that the original versions came with serious hazards. Early Shrinky Dinks required baking in standard home ovens, and as they heated, they released fumes from the plastic sheets that were far from healthy. Kids often pressed their faces close to the oven door, noses nearly touching the glass, to watch their designs twist and curl like magic. The transformation was hypnotic, bright markers darkening, edges curling, and colors deepening into perfect little trinkets. For a few glorious minutes, the entire kitchen smelled like excitement and chemical vapor, and no one thought twice about it. The smell was sharp and unmistakable, filling kitchens with a chemical tang that left many parents concerned. Kids huddled around the oven door to watch the transformation, unaware that they were breathing in harmful gases. While no major disasters were widely reported, growing concern about fumes and burns forced manufacturers to redesign the product with safer materials and methods. Despite the risk, Shrinky Dinks became an icon of 1980s crafting, a mix of creativity, danger, and instant gratification. The thrill of watching your artwork warp, curl, and harden into something permanent was unforgettable, even if it came with a dose of toxic nostalgia. Household drain cleaners containing sodium hydroxide pellets were considered the heavy-duty heroes of the 1980s. Kitchen and bathroom people loved how the pellets hissed and steamed when water hit them, as if tough clogs were surrendering on the spot. But sodium hydroxide, once mixed, caused burns on contact, releasing fumes harsh enough to sting eyes and throats. Kids often stood nearby out of curiosity, watching the reaction without knowing the danger. Homeowners kept these cleaners under sinks, within easy reach of small hands, never imagining that a single handful of spilled pellets could cause serious injury. When incidents began to mount, regulators stepped in, banning the most dangerous formulations. Families were left to reconsider the tools they trusted to keep their homes running smoothly. And in hindsight, the idea that something so potent was ever sold for everyday use feels shocking, almost reckless. Brominated vegetable oil lurked inside the citrus-flavored sodas and fruit drinks of the 1980s, keeping bright colors evenly distributed instead of floating to the top like an oily film. The additive was originally developed as a flame retardant, a detail that seems almost impossible to believe given how casually it appeared in beverages marketed to children and families. Manufacturers valued it for keeping drinks looking consistent and appealing on store shelves. Kids guzzled orange sodas, lemon-lime concoctions, and fruity punches without any idea that a chemical designed to stop fires swirled through every sip. But bromine accumulates in the body, building up in fatty tissues and potentially causing neurological harm with prolonged exposure. When researchers raised alarms about long-term effects, regulators around the world took notice. Many countries banned brominated vegetable oil entirely, and major beverage companies eventually reformulated products under public pressure. The additive that once seemed like harmless convenience became one of the strangest examples of industrial chemicals finding their way into the food supply. Potted meat and Vienna sausages in tiny tins found their way into stockings and snack drawers as affordable holiday treats that looked almost whimsical in their compact packaging. The potted meat spread onto crackers like a pâté for people who had never heard the word, salty and dense with a texture that some loved and others tolerated. Vienna sausages slid out of their cans in neat little rows, pale pink and glistening, ready to be eaten straight or tucked into recipes that made do with what was available. Kids saw them as novelty foods, something fun and different from the usual meals, and that perception made the budget stretch easier. Parents appreciated how long the tiny tins lasted in the pantry, never spoiling, always ready when hunger struck without warning. They showed up at picnics, road trips, and late-night snacking sessions, never demanding refrigeration or special treatment. And during the holidays, they became stocking stuffers that actually got eaten instead of tossed aside. The tins were cheap, the contents were filling, and the memories they created lasted far longer than anyone expected. Parents in the 1970s wanted their babies to walk sooner, move faster, and explore the world safely. Baby walkers with metal frames seemed like the perfect invention, a sturdy little chariot for curious toddlers. The commercials showed smiling babies zipping around kitchens, their mothers laughing proudly. But reality was far from safe. The metal frames were heavy, the wheels moved too easily, and one wrong push sent babies tumbling downstairs or into sharp corners. Doctors and safety experts warned of the risks, but television ads kept showing picture-perfect homes where babies moved freely and safely. Behind the marketing glow were countless emergency room visits for skull fractures, broken limbs, and concussions. The wheels that symbolized independence also carried children straight into danger at speeds no one anticipated. Emergency rooms filled with injuries that no one saw coming. Pediatricians begged for the product to be rethought, but the market kept booming. It took years for regulations to catch up, and by then, the damage was done. What was supposed to symbolize independence became a silent threat rolling across living room floors. The sound of those tiny wheels once meant joy, but for many families, it ended in fear. Christmas Eve had a dark side. While kids slept dreaming of morning, parents were downstairs with a pile of parts, a single sheet of instructions, and a flashlight clenched between their teeth. Assembly required, sanity not included. Every toy in the 1980s came in pieces. Bikes, dollhouses, race car tracks, kitchen sets. The instructions were always vague, sometimes in 3 languages, and occasionally just a drawing that looked like it was made by someone who had never seen the toy. You needed a Phillips head screwdriver, a flathead, an Allen wrench, and possibly a degree in engineering. Tabs did not fit into slots. Screws were missing. And someone always whispered, "I think we put that part on backwards." Dads muttered things under their breath. Moms held the flashlight and tried not to laugh. Hours passed. Coffee was brewed. Somewhere around 2 a.m., the thing was finally built. Slightly crooked, definitely unstable, but upright. And in the morning, you ran downstairs and played with it for 10 minutes before moving on to the next gift. You never knew. You never saw the sweat, the frustration, the moment your dad considered just returning the whole thing. All you saw was magic. And that was the point. Slap bracelets were everywhere in the late 1980s. Classrooms, malls, playgrounds. Kids collected them by the dozen, showing off neon colors and wild patterns. The trick was simple. Snap the straight band against your wrist and watch it curl around perfectly. Some kids took it a step further, slapping them across backpacks, arms, and even faces in playful fights. The noise of a dozen bracelets snapping at once could fill an entire hallway, driving teachers insane. For a few glorious years, they were the ultimate symbol of rebellion, something that annoyed adults but made you instantly cool. But beneath that fabric lay a thin strip of sharp-edged metal. Over time, the covering wore down or tore, revealing the raw steel underneath. Soon, reports of cut wrists and sliced skin started pouring in. Some schools banned them outright, calling them distracting and dangerous. Still, the craze was unstoppable for a while. Every kid wanted to hear that satisfying snap, no matter how many warnings came from teachers or parents. They were the perfect mix of rebellion and style, a fashion statement that literally left its mark. Plastic lunchboxes lined with asbestos, strengthened panels were popular in the 1980s because they were durable, colorful, and built to survive schoolyard chaos. Parents bought them believing they were sturdy enough for daily use, never suspecting what was sealed inside the hard plastic walls. Asbestos fibers helped reinforce the panels, improving heat resistance and strength, but they also introduced risks no parent would knowingly accept. Kids carried these lunchboxes everywhere, bumping them against tables, dropping them on playgrounds, and placing them on cafeteria trays without knowing that damage or aging could potentially release something unsafe. The characters and designs on the outside made them feel fun and harmless, almost like toys disguised as food containers. It was not until later that researchers uncovered the full scope of the danger the bans followed, and families quickly discarded items they had once cherished. Looking back, it is unsettling to realize that something meant to hold sandwiches and snacks carried risks hidden behind colorful paint. And today, These lunchboxes serve as a symbol of how even the most ordinary childhood objects can harbor secrets no one ever imagined. Carrageenan infant formula nourished babies throughout the 1980s, the seaweed-derived thickener keeping liquid formulas smooth and consistent in ways parents appreciated. Manufacturers added it to prevent separation, improve texture, and create products that poured easily from bottles without clumping. Parents trusted these formulas completely, feeding them to infants whose developing systems depended entirely on whatever adults chose to provide. The ingredient seemed natural enough, derived from red seaweed used in food preparation for centuries. Nobody questioned whether something so traditional could pose any risk to the tiniest consumers. But research eventually raised concerns about carrageenan triggering inflammation in digestive systems, with potential implications for infant gut health that worried pediatricians and parents alike. Manufacturers began removing the additive from baby formulas, reformulating products to eliminate even theoretical risks to vulnerable newborns. Today, most infant formulas advertise their carrageenan-free status. Those old cans represent an era when assumptions about natural ingredients gave way to more careful scrutiny of everything entering infant bodies. Pesticide foggers containing chlordane were marketed as miracle solutions for basement pests and household infestations in the 1980s. With one press of a button, homes filled with a chemical fog that settled into carpets, walls, and clothing. Parents used them confidently, believing they were doing the right thing to protect their families from insects and rodents. But chlordane lingered far longer than anyone realized, clinging to indoor surfaces and circulating through household air systems. Researchers eventually found that prolonged exposure could cause serious harm, turning a once trusted product into a public health concern. By the time regulators intervened, countless families had already filled their homes with chemical residue that would not disappear easily. The trust people placed in those bright canisters now feels painfully misplaced, a reminder that even the most well-intentioned household habits can carry hidden costs. Super elastic bubble plastic was one of those toys that looked like pure fun on television commercials but came with an invisible danger no one saw coming. Sold in colorful tubes, the goo could be squeezed out and blown into shimmering, wobbly balloons using a small plastic straw. It was mesmerizing, the texture, the smell, the rainbow sheen. Kids would sit for hours blowing one bubble after another, trying to make them bigger and more perfect than before. But hidden in that sweet-smelling goo was a cocktail of chemicals, including solvents that released toxic fumes. The smell that made children dizzy with excitement was actually the odor of danger. Parents often complained of headaches, and a few unlucky kids found out the hard way that the mixture was also highly flammable. Many homes banned it after near misses with open flames or gas stoves. Still, its appeal was undeniable, and it remained a favorite in countless toy boxes until authorities caught up with the risks. In hindsight, it was the kind of toy that perfectly summed up the 1980s. Bright, bold, creative, and just a little too close to catastrophe. Homemade gifts from relatives were a holiday gamble. Sometimes you got a beautiful hand-knit sweater. Other times you got a crocheted toilet paper cover shaped like a poodle. You smiled either way, because that was the rule. Aunts and grandmas were crafty, very crafty. You unwrapped the gift slowly, unsure what was inside. A macrame owl? A needlepoint pillow with your name misspelled? A latch hook rug in colors that matched absolutely nothing in your house? You held it up, nodded, and said, "I love it," while making eye contact with your sibling across the room. They were barely holding it together. These gifts were made with love. Real love. Hours of work, yards of yarn, and a pattern from a 1974 craft magazine. They were not cool. They were not useful, but they were given with pride. You displayed them, at least until the relative left. Then they went into a closet, a drawer, or a box labeled "Grandma's stuff." But years later, you found them again. And suddenly they meant everything, because Grandma was gone. And that weird owl, that was her hands, her time, her way of saying, "I thought of you." You kept it. You always kept it, even if it was shaped like a mushroom. In the 1970s, microwave ovens were the crown jewel of kitchen technology. They cooked faster, looked futuristic, and promised freedom from the oven. Everyone wanted one. But early models came with a terrifying flaw: radiation leakage. The doors did not seal properly, allowing microwave energy to escape into the room. People reported strange sensations, headaches, and even interference with medical devices like pacemakers. Engineers rushed to patch the issue, but many homes kept using their old machines, unaware of the invisible risk humming beside them. What makes it chilling is how normal it all seemed. The soft hum, the warm food, the invisible waves. Microwaves changed the way America cooked, but their early days were filled with more mystery than safety. Progress, as always, came with a price, and this one could not be seen, only felt. Instant mashed potatoes from a box saved countless holiday dinners when time ran short and real potatoes felt like too much work. The flakes poured out like snowdrift into boiling water, transforming within seconds into something that resembled the creamy side dish everyone expected on the table. Families added extra butter, a splash of milk, and sometimes a spoonful of sour cream to disguise the texture that never quite matched the real thing. Kids scooped them onto plates without suspicion, mixing them with gravy until the origins became impossible to detect. Parents appreciated the speed, the consistency, and the price that allowed them to stretch the grocery budget toward the meat or the dessert. Real mashed potatoes took time that busy households did not always have, especially during the chaos of holiday cooking when every burner was occupied. Instant potatoes filled the gap without judgment, sitting in the pantry until the moment they were needed. They were never the star of the meal, but they showed up reliably, blending into the background of family dinners where presence mattered more than perfection. Macrame was everywhere in the 1970s. From wall art to plant holders, it was the ultimate expression of homemade beauty and bohemian life. Then came macrame hanging lamps, the perfect marriage of craft and function. Warm, textured, handmade, they turned living rooms into cozy sanctuaries. But as it turned out, beauty and fire rarely mix well. The woven cords, often made from cotton or jute, dangled dangerously close to incandescent bulbs that burned hot enough to ignite them in seconds. Families admired their glow, unaware that the same lamp could go up in flames at the flick of a switch. Fire departments quietly began issuing warnings, but by then macrame had already woven its way into millions of homes. The ads called them a touch of natural warmth. But that warmth sometimes became all too literal. The danger was poetic in its irony. Something hand-woven with care could end up destroying what it was meant to decorate. Even now, vintage collectors love their retro charm, but they do so with caution, knowing that one of the 1970s most iconic designs doubled as an accidental fire trap. It is the perfect example of a time when style burned brighter than safety. Some trees were green. Some trees were real, and some trees were aluminum. Shiny, silver, space-age aluminum, standing in the corner of the living room like a prop from a 1960s sci-fi movie that refused to leave. These trees did not have lights on them. They had a color wheel. A rotating disc with red, blue, green, and gold panels sat on the floor, shining a spotlight up at the tree. As it turned, the whole tree changed color, slowly cycling through a psychedelic holiday light show. It looked like Christmas on another planet. Some people loved it. Others thought it was the strangest thing they had ever seen. Either way, you could not look away. The aluminum branches were sharp. You learned that the hard way if you tried to hang ornaments too fast. The tree made a faint metallic rustle every time someone walked past, and it never smelled like pine because it was not pine. It was reflective industrial material shaped like a tree. But when that color wheel hit it just right, magic. Grandma had one in the den. Your weird aunt had one in the living room. You probably still remember exactly where it stood and what it looked like glowing red at midnight. They do not make them like that anymore. And maybe that is for the best, but also, maybe not. The CSI Fingerprint Kit was marketed as the ultimate science toy for curious minds. Inspired by television detectives and forensic heroes, it let kids dust for fingerprints using real powders and brushes. It sounded educational, even sophisticated. But in one of the most jaw-dropping toy scandals of the era, those fingerprint powders were later found to contain asbestos. Parents were horrified to learn that the same material linked to lung disease and cancer was in their children's hands and floating through their playrooms. Lawsuits followed, and the kit was swiftly pulled from stores, but the damage to trust was lasting. It was the kind of oversight that could only happen in a time when regulation had not yet caught up with innovation. Ironically, a toy designed to teach kids about solving crimes ended up being one of the biggest safety crimes of all. Even today, the story of the asbestos fingerprint kit remains one of the strangest examples of how 1980s ambition often ran far ahead of common sense. Aluminum cookware coated with unregulated non-stick surfaces was a quiet staple in 1980s kitchens, the kind of cookware parents used for everything from morning eggs to late-night leftovers. These pans promised easy cleaning and quick cooking, which seemed like a miracle to busy households. But the coating on many early non-stick surfaces could break down at high heat, releasing fumes that posed real dangers when inhaled families cooked with them daily, unaware that scratches and heat damage made the coatings unstable. Parents relied on these pans for convenience, thinking they represented the best of modern kitchen technology. But as research emerged, the chemicals inside the coatings became a serious concern. Regulators stepped in, families replaced their cookware, and manufacturers raced to create safer alternatives. People began to rethink what they trusted in their kitchens, realizing that convenience alone could not outweigh hidden risks. And today, these old pans serve as another reminder that progress sometimes comes with costs no one sees until much later. Aflatoxin-contaminated peanut butter sat in kitchen cabinets across the country during the 1980s, spreading invisibly onto sandwiches that children ate day after day. Aflatoxins are toxic compounds produced by mold that grows on peanuts, corn, and other crops, especially when storage conditions allow humidity to build. Back then, testing protocols were inconsistent, and contaminated batches slipped through quality control systems that had not yet caught up with the danger. Parents trusted peanut butter as wholesome protein, a lunchbox staple that kids loved and adults considered nutritious. Nobody examined jars for signs of contamination or questioned whether something so ordinary could carry real harm. But aflatoxins are among the most potent naturally occurring carcinogens known to science, capable of causing liver damage and cancer with repeated exposure. When outbreaks traced back to contaminated peanut products, regulators implemented strict testing requirements that transformed the industry. Today, peanut butter undergoes rigorous screening before reaching shelves. Those old jars represent an era when trust in familiar foods outweighed the caution we now know was always necessary. Canned vegetables for holiday side dishes lined the pantry shelves in rows of green, yellow, and pale white, their labels promising convenience and a price that fit the tightest budget. Green beans sat in water that tasted faintly metallic. Corn kernels floated in cloudy brine, and peas rolled out of the can with a softness that fresh produce could never replicate. Families heated them on the stove with a pat of margarine, a shake of salt, and the hope that presentation would carry them through dinner. Nobody mentioned that the neighbors might be serving fresh vegetables or something frozen that still held a crunch. Canned sides were dependable, affordable, and fast, which mattered more during busy holiday seasons than anyone cared to admit. Kids pushed them around their plates, bargaining for dessert and promising to eat every last bite. Parents scooped them into serving bowls that once belonged to grandmothers, treating the contents with the same care as anything homemade. And at the end of the meal, those bowls were often empty, picked clean by people who were simply grateful to have food on the table at all. In the 1970s, fiberglass was hailed as the future of fabric, clean, modern, and nearly indestructible. Fiberglass drapes promised homeowners elegance that would never fade, wrinkle, or mildew. They looked soft, light, and airy, glowing in the sunshine like silk spun from clouds. But the moment you touched them, you learned the truth. The threads were made of microscopic glass fibers that broke loose and embedded themselves in skin, itching for days. Worse still, those same fibers floated invisibly through the air, irritating throats and lungs. People vacuumed more, dusted more, never realizing they were spreading the very danger they wanted to remove. Ads bragged that fiberglass curtains were the cleanest fabric ever made, and technically they were. They cleaned you right out of your comfort. Hospitals later traced mysterious rashes and coughing fits back to these drapes. It is astonishing how something designed for beauty and health could become a slow, invisible hazard. They glittered like progress itself, but left a trail of irritation and regret. Fiberglass drapes taught a hard lesson. Sometimes the sleekest innovations scratch the hardest. Wrapping paper was not disposable, not in the 1980s, at least not in your house. You unwrapped gifts slowly, carefully peeling back the tape so the paper stayed intact. Because someone worked hard on that, and we can use it again next year. Bows were definitely saved. Bows were currency. You flattened the paper, you folded it, you put it in a bag or a drawer where it sat with 15 other pieces from Christmases past. Some had creases, some had tape marks. One was definitely from 1979 and still had a gift tag with someone else's name on it. Did not matter, it was still perfectly good. The really fancy paper, the shiny foil kind, was treated like treasure. You handled it with reverence. You stored it flat. You brought it out only for special gifts. And when you used it the next year, you felt resourceful, responsible, like a tiny recycling warrior in a holiday sweater. Today, people rip through wrapping like it is meaningless. But you remember when a clean tear was a skill, and somewhere in your parents' house, there is still a drawer full of saved paper, waiting. Rubber cement was a staple in 1980s school supply packs, a bottle that every child recognized by its sharp scent and stringy texture. The moment the cap twisted off, the smell filled the room, drifting across desks and lingering through entire art classes. What few people realized was that the solvent inside some rubber cement formulas posed serious risks, especially when used in closed spaces without ventilation. Kids brushed it on posters, construction paper, and cardboard, often waving the papers around as the adhesive dried into invisible fumes. Teachers treated it as a normal craft supply, unaware that tiny daily exposures could add up over time. The chemical inside made the glue spread smoothly and dry quickly, but it also carried risks that became impossible to ignore as research evolved. When restrictions finally arrived, they were met with real concern because so many children had used bottles of this adhesive without a second thought. Parents reevaluated school supplies, classrooms switched to safer alternatives, and the old bottles became relics of a decade that assumed convenience alone meant safety. Today, rubber cement serves as a quiet reminder that even the simplest school essentials can hide dangers we only understand much later. Lead-soldered canned foods were pantry staples throughout the 1980s, stacked in neat rows of soups, vegetables, fruits, and baby foods that families relied on for convenience. The seams of those cans were sealed with lead solder, a technique standard in manufacturing for decades. Nobody questioned it because canned food represented safety, preservation, and modern efficiency. Parents heated these products for quick dinners, packed them in lunches, and spooned them into the mouths of infants without any hesitation. But lead does not stay locked in metal. It leaches slowly into food inside, especially when contents are acidic, like tomatoes or citrus. Children absorb this heavy metal with every bite, accumulating toxins that damage developing brains and nervous systems. When scientists connected widespread lead exposure to canned food consumption, evidence was damning. Federal regulations eventually banned lead solder in food packaging, but countless families had already consumed years of contaminated meals. Looking back, it is chilling to realize that cans meant to nourish instead quietly poisoned an entire generation. Spray-on flea treatments containing organophosphate chemicals were one of those everyday items people trusted without hesitation. In the 1980s, pet owners sprayed them on dogs, cats, and even living room carpets, believing they were protecting their homes from pests. What they did not realize was that organophosphate residue absorbed through skin and lingered in the air long after the spraying stopped. Families breathed it in, pets licked it off their fur, and children played on carpets that were still coated with a chemical haze no one could see. For many people, the strong smell meant the treatment was working, not that it might be dangerous. It took years for health experts to connect the dots between these products and serious neurological concerns, and when those findings surfaced, the shock hit hard, because these sprays felt like such a normal part of household routines. Suddenly, something used out of love for pets turned into a warning about how easily safety could be misunderstood. Regulators moved in, restrictions tightened, and families who once relied on these sprays now looked back with a mixture of disbelief and worry. It was a reminder that even the habits made out of care can sometimes carry risks no one ever expected. The Easy Bake Oven of the 1980s felt like pure independence in a box. With a tiny light bulb acting as the heat source, kids could bake small cakes and cookies all by themselves. It was marketed as a way to feel grown up, and it worked, maybe too well. Many kids used the oven to experiment, tossing in candy bars, crayons, or whatever was in the pantry just to see what would happen. The smell that filled the room was equal parts sugar and smoke, and parents would come running only to find melted chaos inside. Some kids even charged friends a few cents to taste test their creations, proudly serving up burned chocolate and half-cooked dough. The problem was those little ovens could get dangerously hot. Thousands of children burned their fingers or hands trying to pull out the metal pans, and some even ended up with serious blisters. There were no automatic shutoffs, and the compact design trapped heat in ways no one expected. Parents quickly realized the toy was more hazard than hobby. Later versions introduced safety doors and cooler heating elements, but by then, the damage to its reputation was done. The 1980s model still holds a nostalgic place in many hearts, but it also taught an entire generation a hard lesson. Sometimes being just like mom comes with a price. You did not just watch a Charlie Brown Christmas, you felt it. That sad little tree, that big empty auditorium, that moment when Linus stepped into the spotlight and quoted scripture while everyone stood still. It hit different, every single year. The animation was simple, the music was jazz, the story was quiet, but something about it reached into your chest and squeezed. You watched Charlie Brown doubt himself, mess up, and almost give up. And then you watched everyone rally around him. That tree, decorated with one ornament, suddenly looked beautiful. And you sat there, 8 years old, trying not to cry in front of your family. The Peanuts gang danced weird. They talked weird. They had no parents, only disembodied trombone voices. But they were yours. You watched it every year. You still do. And when Linus says, "That's what Christmas is all about, Charlie Brown," something still shifts inside you. That special was not flashy. It was not loud. But it was honest. And it reminded you that even the smallest, saddest things could be transformed by a little bit of love. If you were a kid in the early 1970s, you probably remember the sound of clackers, the rhythmic click of two acrylic balls smashing together on a string. They were mesmerizing, addictive, and impossible to put down. Every playground echoed with that familiar clack, clack, clack of triumph. But fun quickly turned to fear when kids started showing up with bruises, cuts, and even eye injuries. The acrylic balls could shatter mid-swing, exploding into shards sharp enough to draw blood. Children compared the loudest clack to a badge of honor, competing to see who could swing them the fastest. But the harder they swung, the greater the danger. Tiny shards flew like shrapnel, sometimes slicing faces and arms. Parents called them toys, but in motion, they looked and sounded more like weapons. Parents panicked. Schools banned them. Yet for a brief moment, clackers were everywhere. Symbols of carefree childhood and the chaos of a decade that loved to experiment. Looking back, it is hard not to laugh at how dangerous, harmless fun once was. They were toys that taught a whole generation one unforgettable lesson. Sometimes excitement really can break in your hands. Jiffy cornbread mix came in small boxes that cost almost nothing and produced golden squares of warm, slightly sweet bread that paired beautifully with nearly everything on the holiday table. The batter took minutes to prepare, stirred together with an egg and a splash of milk before sliding into the oven alongside whatever else was already cooking. Kids fought over the corner pieces where the crust turned crispy and the edges browned just enough to crackle between their teeth. Parents served it with chili, with beans, with ham, and with anything else that needed something warm and filling to complete the plate properly. The box promised simplicity, and it delivered without fail every single time the family needed it. Real cornbread from scratch took more ingredients, more time, and more skill than busy holiday kitchens could always afford to spare. Jiffy bridged the gap without apology, offering a shortcut that tasted close enough to homemade that most people never questioned it. The little blue and white box became a holiday staple in homes where the budget demanded compromises, earning loyalty from families who came to depend on its quiet reliability. There was no streaming, no on-demand, no watch it whenever you want. In the 1980s, if a Christmas special aired, you watched it, or you waited another whole year. That was the deal. And it made every special feel like an event. You checked the TV guide, you circled the date, you told your friends at school what night it was on. Rudolph, Frosty, The Grinch, Charlie Brown. They each had their night, and you planned your life around it. Homework got done early. Dinner got eaten fast. You sat in front of the TV with your feet tucked under you, waiting for that opening music like it was the national anthem. And if someone changed the channel during a commercial, war. There was no pausing, no rewinding. If you missed the part where the Grinch's heart grew 3 sizes, you just missed it. You had to imagine it based on what your friend told you at recess. Some families taped them on VHS, but that required planning, a blank tape, and someone who knew how to set the timer. Most of the time, you just showed up live and hoped for the best. The commercials were part of the magic. Toy ads that made everything look 10 times cooler than it actually was. You memorized jingles. You whispered, "I want that," 12 times per break. These specials were appointment television, and somehow that made them sacred. The Battlestar Galactica missile-firing action figures were supposed to be every young sci-fi fan's dream come true. The toy line mirrored the excitement of the television show, with detailed spaceships and figures that could actually shoot small plastic missiles. Kids loved the realism, until that realism turned deadly. The missiles were small enough to fit into a child's mouth, and tragically, one boy choked to death after accidentally inhaling a projectile. That single event led to a massive recall and a permanent change in toy safety design. From that moment on, most manufacturers removed missile-launching features or made projectiles too large to swallow. At the time, though, parents were outraged that something marketed as safe had taken such a dark turn. The figures themselves became infamous collector's items, frozen in history as a symbol of the industry's recklessness. What started as a celebration of science fiction imagination ended with a harsh reality check about just how dangerous realistic play could become. Aerosol carpet cleaners containing benzene were popular in the 1980s because they promised instant freshness with minimal effort. A few sprays, a little scrubbing, and carpets looked brand new. But benzene, a known carcinogen, lingered in the air long after the foam disappeared. Families used these cleaners weekly, sometimes daily, especially in homes with pets or children. The smell was sharp, almost chemical sweet, but in the 80s, people trusted anything sold in bright cans with cheerful branding. Over time, scientists uncovered the link between benzene exposure and blood-related illnesses, sparking alarm in households that had relied on these cleaners for years. The ban came with a jolt, forcing families to rethink not just what they cleaned their homes with, but what they allowed into their air. The product that once symbolized cleanliness instead became a haunting reminder of how easily toxins can masquerade as convenience. Des-treated beef and veal arrived on dinner tables across the country during the 1980s without anyone suspecting the danger hidden inside every tender bite. Diethylstilbestrol was a synthetic hormone implanted in cattle to accelerate growth, helping animals bulk up faster and reach market weight with less feed. Ranchers loved the efficiency, and consumers enjoyed lower prices without questioning how those savings were achieved. Families grilled steaks, roasted roasts, and served veal cutlets, believing they were providing wholesome protein. But DES had a horrifying history that should have raised alarms, because the same hormone given to pregnant women to prevent miscarriage caused devastating cancers in their children decades later. When researchers connected DES residues in meat to similar risks, shock waves hit the agricultural industry. Regulators banned the hormone from livestock production, but damage to public confidence was immense. People looked at their freezers filled with beef and wondered what they had already consumed. It remains one of the clearest examples of how shortcuts in food production can carry consequences lasting for generations. Store-brand ice cream in the rectangular cardboard tub sat in freezers as the affordable treat that made holiday desserts possible without emptying the grocery budget. The tub was plain, printed with simple stripes or generic designs that made no attempt to compete with the fancy containers nearby. Inside, the ice cream was slightly icier than premium brands, slightly less creamy, but still cold and sweet, and exactly what everyone wanted after a big meal. Parents scooped it over warm pie, alongside cake, or straight into bowls for kids who had earned something sweet for finishing their vegetables. The flavors were basic, usually vanilla, chocolate, or strawberry, but they paired with everything and complained about nothing. The cardboard tub often found a second life in the freezer, refilled with homemade soup or used to store leftovers until someone remembered to throw it away. Nobody mistook it for gourmet, but nobody expected gourmet either. The ice cream did its job quietly and consistently, melting into memories that had nothing to do with brand names and everything to do with family gathered around the table. No 1970s bathroom was complete without a pop of color, and nothing said modern like an avocado green hairdryer. Sleek, portable, and professional, they made getting ready feel glamorous. Women plugged them in near sinks and bathtubs, never thinking twice about the danger. These dryers had no grounding wires, no circuit protection, and no thermal cutoff to prevent overheating. Drop one in water, and you could be electrocuted in seconds. Leave it running too long, and the motor might catch fire. Yet manufacturers sold them as safe for the whole family. They were often included in matching bathroom sets, part of the design rather than the danger. The hum of those dryers filled countless mornings, a symbol of beauty and self-care. But behind the hum was heat, electricity, and risk. Some families learned the truth only after tragedy. Looking back, it is shocking how close danger sat to the sink each day. The avocado green hairdryer remains one of the decade's prettiest and most perilous accessories. Every holiday season, someone gave your family a fruitcake. It arrived in a box, wrapped in plastic, dense as a brick, and studded with mysterious candied fruit in colors not found in nature. It sat on the counter. It was acknowledged. It was never eaten. Fruitcake was a holiday tradition no one actually wanted. You poked it once. It did not give. You tried to cut it. The knife bounced off. Someone made a joke about using it as a doorstop, and honestly, that was not far from the truth. It sat there through Christmas, through New Year's, and sometimes into January, slowly becoming part of the furniture. Legend had it that the same fruitcake got passed from family to family, year after year, aging like a cursed artifact. You did not eat it, you survived it. Some fruitcakes came soaked in rum or brandy, which made adults slightly more interested. But kids wanted cookies, fudge, anything that was not a fossilized loaf of fruit and regret. The fruitcake was a test of politeness, of patience, and of your ability to smile and say, "Thank you, this looks great." You never saw anyone finish one, but you always saw one arrive. It was the gift that kept on giving, whether you wanted it or not. Moon shoes promised the dream of anti-gravity, a trampoline you could wear on your feet. Kids strapped them on and bounced across driveways, pretending they were astronauts. It was exciting, wild and completely unpredictable. Friends would challenge each other to jump higher or run while wearing them, often ending in spectacular wipeouts. The sound of laughter mixed with the inevitable thud of someone hitting the ground was part of every moon shoe memory. Despite the danger, the feeling of defying gravity, even for a few seconds, was too tempting to resist. The rubber bands that provided the spring were unstable, snapping or slipping without warning. One wrong jump, and you were face first on the pavement. Sprained ankles, twisted knees, and a few broken noses were common battle scars. But that did not stop kids from begging for a pair every Christmas. The commercials made them look effortless, like floating on the moon, but in reality, it was like strapping chaos to your feet. The 1980s loved risk, and moon shoes captured that spirit perfectly. Part science fiction, part disaster waiting to happen. In the 1980s, pediatric cold medicines packed with banned stimulants sat proudly on pharmacy shelves, wrapped in colorful labels that promised fast relief for sniffles and congestion. Parents gave them freely to children, trusting the cheerful branding and familiar logos. What most families did not know was that many of these medicines contained powerful stimulants capable of increasing heart rate, disrupting sleep, and causing unexpected behavioral changes. Kids took them before school, before bedtime, or any time a cold lingered too long, often with no idea that the relief came with risks far greater than anyone realized. These medicines were considered modern tools of convenience, the kind of thing every parent had in the bathroom cabinet. But over time, pediatricians and researchers uncovered the darker side of those ingredients. When the truth surfaced, the shock was immediate, because something so widely trusted suddenly felt like a threat hiding in plain sight. The bans arrived with firm clarity, and families rushed to replace medicines they had relied on for years. Looking back, it feels almost surreal that such strong ingredients made their way into products meant for the youngest and most vulnerable. And it stands as a reminder that not everything marketed as gentle truly is. Saccharin products with cancer warnings lined grocery shelves throughout the 1980s. Those little pink packets in diet sodas carrying labels that would alarm any careful reader. The artificial sweetener had been linked to bladder cancer in laboratory animals, and regulators required manufacturers to print warnings directly on packaging. Yet consumers kept buying, kept sweetening their coffee, kept choosing diet drinks despite the ominous text staring back at them from every label. The desire for calorie-free sweetness outweighed the fear that warning labels were meant to inspire. People rationalized that the studies involved unrealistic doses, that humans were different from laboratory rats, that surely something so widely available could not be truly dangerous. Families used saccharin daily, stirring it into beverages and sprinkling it over cereal without fully absorbing what those warnings meant. Later research eventually led regulators to remove the warning requirement, though debates about artificial sweetener safety continue today. Those pink packets represent an era when consumers knowingly accepted labeled risks in exchange for the sweetness they craved. Polyester was the fabric of the future, shiny, smooth, and effortlessly modern. In the 1970s, it covered everything from clothing to home decor. When polyester curtains hit the market, homeowners fell in love. They looked elegant, never needed ironing, and came in every color imaginable. But there was a hidden problem. Polyester burns fast and hot. A single spark from a candle, a brush against a space heater, or even a cigarette could turn them into a sheet of fire. Magazines called them the miracle of modern fibers, celebrating their durability and low maintenance, but left out the fact that once they caught fire, they melted onto skin. The chemical smell of burning polyester haunted firefighters and emergency rooms alike. It was fashion and function turned fatal under the glow of a single match. Reports of sudden household blazes started surfacing, each one eerily similar. The wrinkle-free revolution had quietly introduced a new kind of danger. Yet companies rarely mentioned that part in their glossy catalogs. People wanted convenience, and they got it, along with a risk they never saw coming. Polyester promised glamour but delivered flames. It is chilling to think how many living rooms glowed with more than just style. Canned ham with the key opener was the centerpiece of countless holiday tables in the 1980s, glistening under kitchen lights as if it had earned its place at the head of the spread. The metal key attached to the side was almost ceremonial, twisted slowly until the lid curled away and revealed the pink dome of pressed meat inside. It smelled faintly of salt and something vaguely smoky, and it sliced cleanly into rounds that looked almost elegant when fanned across a platter. Families who could not afford a fresh roast or a honey-glazed spiral found dignity in this tin-encased alternative, dressing it up with pineapple rings, maraschino cherries, and a sticky brown sugar glaze. Children watched the slicing with fascination, unaware that the ham represented careful budgeting and weeks of saving. It fed a crowd without emptying a wallet, and leftovers lasted well into the new year. The canned ham never tried to be something it was not, and families embraced it without shame. It was protein, it was tradition, and it was enough. And when the last slice was gone, the empty tin often found a second life holding buttons, screws, or childhood treasures. If it was on TV at 2 a.m., it was probably advertised with a shouting man and a phone number burned into your memory. Chia Pets, the Clapper, Flowbee, Ginsu knives. These were the gifts you found under the tree when someone ran out of ideas. And they were glorious. Chia Pets came in every shape: rams, puppies, heads of famous people. You spread the seeds, added water, and waited for your terracotta creature to sprout a chia afro. It never looked like the commercial. It always looked like it had a skin condition. But you loved it anyway. You checked on it daily. You named it. You mourned when it died. The Clapper was chaos. You clapped twice and the lamp turned on. You clapped twice more and it turned off. The dog barked and the lights flickered. Guests clapped for emphasis and the whole room went dark. These gifts were not practical. They were conversation pieces. You watched the commercials so many times you could recite them. But wait, there's more. You believed in the magic of as seen on TV. And sometimes the magic delivered, at least for a week or two. Stretch Armstrong was a marvel of toy engineering, a rubbery superhero who could be pulled, twisted, and stretched to absurd lengths before snapping back into shape. Kids loved testing his limits, often racing to see who could stretch him the farthest without breaking him. The original was fairly sturdy, filled with a dense corn syrup-like gel that made him heavy but oddly satisfying to tug. Then came the knockoffs, cheap imitations that looked the same but were filled with mysterious goo that was anything but safe. Some of these versions would burst open after too much stretching, oozing out a foul-smelling liquid that burned skin and stained carpets. No one really knew what was inside, but it was enough to send panicked parents grabbing paper towels and calling poison control. Others simply fell apart after a few days, their rubber skins tearing or leaking through seams. Despite the mess and mystery, kids adored them for the sheer fun of destruction. There was something about seeing what was inside that was almost irresistible. By the time regulators caught up and many of these knockoffs were banned, the damage was already done, literally and figuratively. Stretch Armstrong may have been about flexibility, but his imitators proved that cutting corners can snap back harder than any stretch ever could. In the 1980s, asbestos brake pads were everywhere, tucked quietly into family cars without anyone giving them a second glance. Parents drove carpools, grocery runs, and summer trips with complete trust in the parts meant to keep them safe. But the friction that made those pads effective also released asbestos dust, coating nearby components and sometimes lingering on hands or clothes after routine maintenance. Mechanics breathed it in daily, wiping their hands on rags and leaning over opened wheels without realizing the stakes. Families had no idea that every stop, turn, and brake produced tiny particles that could drift into garages or stick to tools. When science exposed the truth, the reaction was swift and unsettling. The pads were banned, replaced, and buried under layers of new regulations designed to protect future generations. But even today, the memory of that discovery sits heavy, a reminder that even the parts of life meant to protect us can sometimes do the opposite. Lead-glazed ceramic food containers arrived in American kitchens throughout the 1980s, imported from countries where manufacturing standards differed dramatically from domestic regulations. These colorful bowls, plates, and storage containers caught eyes with their vibrant designs and affordable prices, filling cupboards with pieces that seemed both decorative and practical. Families stored leftovers, served meals, and displayed fruit in containers they never suspected could be dangerous. The glazes looked beautiful, the ceramics felt sturdy, and nothing about their appearance suggested any hidden threat. But lead in ceramic glazes leaches into food, especially when contents are acidic, hot, or stored for extended periods. Families unknowingly poison themselves with every serving of tomato sauce, citrus juice, or pickled vegetables placed in these containers. When testing revealed dangerous lead levels in imported ceramics, regulators banned the most hazardous products and established stricter standards for anything touching food. The colorful dishes that once brightened kitchen shelves now serve as reminders that beauty can sometimes mask serious danger hiding just beneath the surface. Store-brand saltine crackers came in sleeves so long they barely fit in the cabinet, stacked neatly inside boxes that cost a fraction of the name brands sitting one shelf higher. These crackers showed up beside every bowl of soup, every slice of cheese, and every late-night snack that needed something crisp to carry it. The taste was close enough that most kids never noticed the difference, and parents appreciated how far a single box could stretch through the cold months. They crumbled into chili, floated in tomato soup, and disappeared by the handful during holiday movie nights when the family gathered in front of the television. The packaging was plain, the branding forgettable, but the function was identical to anything fancier. Families learned to stop caring about logos when the crackers tasted the same and the savings added up week after week. Some kids even preferred the store brand, though they never admitted it outside the house. Those long sleeves became a quiet constant in kitchens where budgets mattered more than appearances, proof that simplicity could fill a home just as well as anything dressed up in flashy marketing. The 1970s turned Christmas into spectacle. No longer content with simple evergreens, families embraced aluminum Christmas trees, metallic, shiny, futuristic. To complete the look, they added electric color wheels that cast rotating lights in every hue. The result was hypnotic. Pink one moment, blue the next, shimmering like tinsel from another world. It felt magical until you realized the tree was made entirely of metal and plugged into a power source. A single short or frayed wire could turn holiday cheer into a disaster. Sparks flew, fuses blew, and some families found themselves putting out more than candles on Christmas Eve. Yet no one wanted to admit the risk. Those trees were status symbols, proof that your home was modern and sophisticated. The glowing colors reflected a time when innovation meant taking chances, even with fire and electricity. Today, they are collector's items, symbols of a decade that thought everything shiny was safe. It is strange to think that one of the brightest icons of the 1970s came with such a dark side, but that perhaps is what made it shine all the more. There was always one. One toy that every kid wanted, one toy that every store sold out of, one toy that caused actual physical altercations in the aisles of Toys R Us. In the 1980s, it might have been Cabbage Patch Kids, or Teddy Ruxpin, or a Transformers that no one could find. Parents drove to 5 different stores. They called in favors. They showed up at opening and sprinted to the toy aisle like it was an Olympic event. Some succeeded. Some came home defeated, holding a substitute toy and a look of quiet shame. They didn't have it, but this one talks too. The news covered it. Reporters stood outside malls, interviewing parents who had been in line since 4 a.m. Fights broke out. Shelves were emptied. It was retail chaos wrapped in holiday cheer. If you were the kid who got the toy, you were a legend. If you were the kid who got the knockoff version, you learned early that life was not always fair. But either way, the hunt became part of the story. Years later, your parents still talked about it. Remember when I drove to 3 states for that doll? You remembered, and you were grateful, even if the toy broke by February. The toy chemistry sets of the 1980s were not the watered-down, safe versions you see today. Back then, they were miniature laboratories filled with real acids, flammable powders, and unmarked mystery chemicals. For a generation raised on curiosity and chaos, they were irresistible. Kitchens turned into science labs and basements filled with smoke as kids tested experiments that often went wrong. Parents discovered scorched countertops, blackened test tubes, and half-melted spoons left behind in the name of science. Some kids proudly created small explosions, convinced they were future geniuses, while their mothers screamed from upstairs to stop making that smell. Kids mixed, boiled, and ignited all sorts of concoctions, often inside their bedrooms. Instructions encouraged experimentation, sometimes even hinting at reactions that produced fire or smoke. The danger was part of the appeal. There were countless reports of burns, ruined carpets, and explosions that sent families running for the garden hose. Yet these kits also inspired many future scientists who credit those reckless experiments for sparking their curiosity. Eventually, regulations forced toy makers to strip the sets of anything remotely hazardous, turning them into safe but boring science-light boxes. The old chemistry sets may have been risky, but for the daring kids of the 1980s, they were proof that discovery often came with a little danger and a lot of smoke. Electric hair dryers in the 1980s were considered one of the great conveniences of the modern world, sleek devices that made mornings faster and easier. But many of them hid something far more troubling inside because the heating cores in certain models were lined with asbestos, a material whose dangers were not widely known to ordinary families. People held these dryers inches from their faces, breathing in warm air that sometimes carried microscopic fibers no one realized were harmful. Parents even used them to warm baby blankets or dry a child's hair after a bath. It seemed like progress at the time, a little piece of luxury woven into daily routines. But when researchers uncovered the risks, the truth spread quickly and created a wave of concern that rippled through households everywhere. Suddenly, a trusted bathroom tool became a symbol of how easily danger could hide in plain sight. Families tossed out dryers they had relied on for years, all while wondering what they had unknowingly inhaled. The shift came hard and fast, turning a familiar hum into a warning that echoed across an entire decade. Artificial butter-flavoring popcorn filled movie theaters and home kitchens throughout the 1980s with that irresistible buttery aroma that made the snack feel indulgent and satisfying. The chemical responsible, diacetyl, created a flavor so convincing that microwave popcorn became a household staple, and the smell alone triggered cravings that sold millions of bags. Families gathered around televisions with steaming bowls, breathing in that rich butter scent without any suspicion that the aroma itself might be harmful. The convenience seemed perfect, a few minutes in the microwave delivering theater-quality popcorn right at home. But workers in popcorn factories began developing a devastating lung disease that doctors eventually traced to inhaling diacetyl vapors during production. The condition, nicknamed popcorn lung, caused irreversible damage that left workers struggling to breathe. When the connection became public, manufacturers reformulated their products and improved factory ventilation. Consumers who had innocently enjoyed that buttery smell suddenly realized the flavoring carried risks that extended far beyond the snack itself. During the 1980s, home radon test kits became a booming trend, promoted as the newest must-have tool for families who wanted to stay ahead of hidden household dangers. But early versions of these test kits relied on actual radioactive sources sealed inside their chambers, a detail that most consumers never realized. People placed them in basements, closets, and hallways, following simple instructions printed on the box without any idea that the device itself was introducing a risk. The marketing promised empowerment, control, and peace of mind. Homeowners felt like they were taking part in real science, checking their houses for invisible threats with tools that seemed sophisticated and trustworthy. Yet inside those slim plastic casings was material capable of emitting its own radiation, small enough to go unnoticed but powerful enough to raise serious concerns. Once discovered families left these kits sitting for days, sometimes weeks, believing they were helping to keep loved ones safe. When researchers uncovered the truth, the reaction was swift and uneasy. Regulators banned these early designs and replaced them with safer sampling methods that avoided radioactive components entirely. The shift forced many people to reconsider what they had placed in their living rooms and basements. It was a jarring reminder that good intentions do not always lead to safe outcomes, especially when new technology is rushed into homes before anyone fully understands the implications. And those early radon test kits still stand out as a cautionary tale about the thin line between protecting a family and accidentally introducing something far more dangerous. Play-Doh's Fuzzy Pumper Barbershop sounded like a dream for every young stylist. You could sit your colorful plastic character in the chair, load Play-Doh into its head, and push down on the lever to make bright, squishy hair sprout through little holes. It was creative, funny, and satisfying, until the mechanism jammed. When the extruder clogged, the only way to fix it was to dig into the small plastic openings with your fingers, which often led to pinches, cuts, or worse, fingers getting stuck. The problem got so bad that parents had to pry the toy apart with butter knives or screwdrivers just to free it. The lever also had enough force to catch skin if pressed carelessly, leaving little hands red and sore. Despite the chaos, the toy became one of the decade's most recognizable playsets, cementing its place in the hall of both fame and infamy. Later redesigns made it safer and easier to clean, but they also lost that tactile weirdness that made the original so iconic. Even now, those who grew up with it can almost feel the squish of Play-Doh in their palms and hear that soft click of the lever, a sound that meant fun was about to turn into frustration. The Fuzzy Pumper taught every kid an early truth: creativity could be messy and sometimes painful too. Putting the star, or the angel, on top of the tree was not just a task. It was a ceremony, and every kid wanted the honor. But there could only be one. Arguments broke out. "I did it last year." "No, you didn't, I did." Parents tried to negotiate, rotate years, flip coins, but someone always felt cheated. The chosen one climbed the step stool, reached toward the ceiling, and placed the topper like they were crowning a king. The others watched, arms crossed, already planning their campaign for next December. Sometimes the star was crooked, sometimes the angel tilted dangerously to one side. You adjusted, you stepped back, you squinted. And when the lights came on and the topper glowed, it did not matter who put it up, it was done. The tree was complete. Until next year, when the whole battle started again, because nothing said sibling rivalry like a 5-pointed star and a plastic stepladder. Dinner in the 1970s was all about presentation. Families gathered around tables dressed in vibrant dishes, bright oranges, deep reds, earthy browns, all colors that screamed modern sophistication. These were the decades of bold patterns and warm tones, and ceramic cookware became the heart of every meal. But those cheerful plates hid a sinister secret. The rich colors were created with lead-based glazes, and with each serving of stew or roast, microscopic traces of that heavy metal seeped into the food. The danger wasn't immediate. It crept in slowly, meal by meal, invisible and tasteless. Housewives scrubbed the dishes clean, never realizing that friction only worsened the leaching. Children grew up with dull headaches, adults complained of fatigue and nausea, and doctors rarely connected it to dinnerware. The irony was bitter. Families had been feeding poison to themselves in the pursuit of style. Manufacturers knew some risk existed but called it negligible, trusting that ignorance would preserve sales. Even imported pottery, celebrated for its artisanal charm, was often glazed with dangerously high lead content. Many homes still have those dishes tucked away in cupboards, a relic from a time when color mattered more than chemistry. Today, collectors love their retro glow, but experts warn never to eat from them again. What once made the table beautiful ended up haunting it for decades. The plates that symbolized togetherness became quiet witnesses to how beauty, in the 1970s, could be deadly in disguise. Canned tuna packed in water became the protein of choice when fresh meat felt like an impossible luxury during the holiday season. The small cans stacked easily in the pantry, waiting to be drained, flaked, and mixed into casseroles, sandwiches, or cold salads that stretched a single can into multiple servings for the family. Kids ate tuna melts on toast, tuna noodle casserole with crushed potato chips on top, and cold tuna salad scooped onto saltine crackers when something quick was needed between holiday chaos. The smell was unmistakable, filling the kitchen the moment the can opener bit into the metal lid. But families learned to love it because it meant dinner was coming together fast. Parents appreciated how affordable it was compared to chicken or beef, and how the protein content made it a respectable centerpiece for budget meals. Mixed with mayonnaise, celery, and a little salt, it transformed into something almost elegant when served on a bed of lettuce or tucked between slices of soft bread. Canned tuna fed families without apology, proving that humble ingredients could still create meals worth remembering fondly. In the 1970s, the oven cleaner aisle looked like a science fiction showcase. Every can promised miracle cleaning that could melt away years of grime with a single spray. Housewives were dazzled by the promise of power, of finally taming the dirtiest corner of the kitchen without breaking a sweat. The problem was that power came with a price. Pressurized oven cleaners used caustic chemicals so potent they could burn skin on contact, and their fumes were enough to make people dizzy, or worse. Windows fogged with the stinging smell of ammonia and lye, and eyes watered as families carried on, thinking a little pain meant progress. It was normal to cough your way through a cleaning session. Companies insisted the fumes were safe in well-ventilated areas, as if every suburban home had a laboratory-grade exhaust system. These products made kitchens sparkle, but at the cost of burning lungs and peeling fingertips. Some users fainted, others suffered long-term damage without realizing it until years later. What makes it haunting is how proudly these cans stood under the sink, a modern badge of cleanliness hiding quiet danger. They sold the dream of convenience, and people bought it, never knowing they were trading air for shine. 3 words. 3 devastating words printed in tiny letters on the side of the box. Batteries not included. You tore open the wrapping paper, you screamed with joy, you tried to turn it on, nothing, no batteries. The toy just sat there, lifeless, mocking you with its potential. You ran to your parents, they checked the junk drawer. Nothing but dead AAs and a single D-cell from 1983. The stores were closed. Christmas was ruined, at least for the next 6 hours until something opened. You spent the morning staring at the toy, pressing buttons that did nothing, imagining what it would sound like if it worked. Some kids got lucky. Their parents bought batteries in advance, hid them in a drawer, and produced them like magicians at the moment of crisis. Those parents were heroes. The rest of us waited. We played with the box, we read the instructions, we held the toy up to our ear and pretended it made sounds. And when the batteries finally came, that first click, that first light, that first noise, it was better than Christmas morning itself. Because you earned it. You waited, you believed, and now you never ever forget to check the box. The Skip It was supposed to be harmless fun, a simple plastic ring around your ankle connected to a ball that spun as you jumped. The goal was to skip over it without tripping, counting rotations with each pass. It was the kind of toy that looked safe until it was not. Every playground had that one kid who took it too far, turning the Skip It into a competitive sport. The plastic ball would smack the pavement like a drum, echoing across recess while lines of kids waited for their turn. It was all fun until someone missed a jump, tripped, and landed hard, usually to the sound of laughter before the nurse was called. The hard plastic ball could easily clip ankles, shins, or even teeth if things went wrong. Many kids learned the pain of getting tangled mid-swing, tumbling onto the pavement in tears. Despite the bruises, it became a playground favorite, with competitions to see who could skip it the longest. Teachers grew tired of the chaos, and some schools banned it outright. Still, its catchy jingle and simple design made it unforgettable. The Skip It may have been dangerous, but it was also pure 1980s energy, loud, competitive, and just a little bit reckless. During the 1980s, urea formaldehyde foam insulation was promoted as an energy-saving breakthrough, something homeowners could proudly use to seal drafts and cut heating bills. It sounded perfect for an era obsessed with modern upgrades. But once installed, the insulation began releasing formaldehyde gas, especially in warm, enclosed spaces. Families noticed headaches, watery eyes, and strange odors long before anyone realized the cause. Contractors praised it for being affordable and easy to apply, so it spread quickly through suburban neighborhoods that trusted every promise of new comfort. And in those early days, no one imagined that their walls were slowly releasing something unsafe into the air. They breathed every single day. When reports finally surfaced, the revelation was devastating, forcing homeowners to rip out insulation they had only recently paid to install. Regulators moved in, safety warnings mounted, and a product once meant to protect people from the cold instead became one of the decade's most unsettling missteps. It was a harsh lesson in how innovation can sometimes hide real danger behind its shiny promises. Red dye number 3 colored the candies, cereals, and desserts of the 1980s in shades of bright cherry and festive pink that children adored without hesitation. It made maraschino cherries glow atop ice cream sundaes, turned fruit snacks into jewel-toned treats, and gave holiday cookies their signature festive look. Parents bought these products without a second thought, assuming anything sold on grocery shelves must be safe. But researchers discovered something troubling when laboratory studies connected the dye to thyroid tumors in animals, raising alarm about what it might do inside human bodies. The FDA banned red dye number 3 from cosmetics, yet the additive lingered in certain foods under older approvals that seemed impossible to untangle. Families who remembered eating handfuls of those bright red candies began questioning what else slipped past safety checks. The controversy sparked lasting debates about artificial colors in the food supply. Looking back, those vivid reds and pinks carry a complicated legacy, a symbol of an era when color mattered more than caution and danger hid behind cheerful packaging. Margarine instead of real butter sat in refrigerators across the country, yellow and soft inside its plastic tub, ready to spread on toast or melt into holiday recipes without complaint. The tub itself was practical, reusable, and destined for a second life, holding leftovers or crayons long after the margarine was gone. Families who bought it rarely mentioned the switch, and most kids never questioned why their bread tasted slightly different from what they ate at a friend's house. Butter was expensive, and margarine offered a workaround that almost no one discussed openly. It spread easier straight from the fridge, which mothers appreciated during busy mornings, and it disappeared into mashed potatoes and baked goods without leaving a trace of guilt. Some grandparents refused to touch it, insisting that butter was the only proper choice, but budgets did not always allow for tradition. The margarine sat quietly beside the eggs and milk, never demanding attention, never pretending to be something it was not. And over time, it became just as familiar as anything else in the kitchen. Kids grew up spreading it on biscuits and never thought twice about what they might have been missing. In the era of modern living, asbestos was marketed as a miracle material. It was heat-resistant, fireproof, and affordable, everything a builder could want. Homeowners proudly installed asbestos ceiling tiles, believing they were upgrading to a safer, more sophisticated home. No one questioned what was in the panels that covered their heads. When the tiles aged, cracked, or were cut during renovations, microscopic fibers filled the air, unseen but deadly. Families breathed it in for years, never suspecting the quiet danger in every breath. It was only later that doctors linked those fibers to lung cancer and mesothelioma, a cruel legacy of convenience. The saddest part is how long it took for the truth to surface. People trusted the advertisements, the packaging, and the promise of safety. Those ceilings were meant to insulate, but they ended up haunting countless lives. The shiny, modern touch of the 1970s turned out to be one of the deadliest materials ever brought into American homes. Going to see Santa at the mall was a rite of passage. It was also, for many kids, a source of pure terror. You waited in line for what felt like hours, surrounded by tinsel and fake snow, while a man in a red suit sat on a giant throne and laughed at children. When it was your turn, you were placed on his lap. Some kids smiled, some froze, some screamed like they had been handed to a stranger in a costume, which technically they had. The photographer snapped anyway. Flash, click. Trauma preserved forever in a 4x6 glossy. The photo always came in a cardboard frame with "Merry Christmas" printed in cursive. You were either grinning, crying, or staring blankly into the middle distance like a hostage. There was no retake. You got what you got. Parents told you to smile. You tried. But Santa smelled like peppermint and cigarette smoke. His beard was slightly crooked, and his lap was weirdly warm. Still, you told him what you wanted. You whispered it like a secret. You believed, at least a little, that this guy had some say in what showed up under the tree. And later, when you saw the photo in the album, you laughed. Because even the terrified ones were kind of adorable, and you would not trade that memory for anything. Polly Pocket was every child's dream, a tiny world that fit right in the palm of your hand. Each compact case opened to reveal a miniature dollhouse or playland, filled with tiny furniture and even tinier dolls. It was charming, portable, and imaginative. But the small size that made Polly Pocket so special was also what made it dangerous. The miniature accessories were easy to lose, and even easier to swallow. Toddlers especially found the colorful pieces irresistible, leading to choking hazards and emergency room visits. Despite safety concerns, Polly Pocket became one of the most beloved toys of the late 1980s and early 1990s, its tiny charm impossible to resist. Manufacturers later redesigned the toy to make pieces larger and safer, but purists say it was never the same. For those who grew up with the original, Polly Pocket represented both the beauty and the peril of 1980s play, small, delicate, and just a little bit dangerous. Glow dust craft powders were the kind of novelty that defined the 1980s. Bright neon powders that lit up bracelets, posters, and school projects. Kids loved the magic of watching their artwork shine in the dark, and parents thought it was just harmless fun. But some early glow dust formulas used low-level radioactive materials to achieve that luminous effect. Children dipped their fingers into the powders, blew them across posters, and sprinkled them onto outfits for parties and school events. The glowing effect felt futuristic and exciting, a little piece of science fiction brought into the real world. But when health experts uncovered the source of the glow, everything changed. Regulators banned these powders quickly, replacing them with safer, non-radioactive alternatives. Families who had once celebrated this trendy craft now looked back with a mix of nostalgia and discomfort. And glow dust became one of the starkest examples of how the decade's love for novelty sometimes outpaced common sense. Nitrite-cured meats without safety limits filled deli counters and refrigerators throughout the 1980s, from sliced ham and bacon to hot dogs and bologna that children devoured without question. The preservatives kept meat looking pink and appetizing while preventing bacterial growth that could cause food poisoning. Families packed sandwiches for school lunches, served platters at gatherings, and fried bacon every weekend morning, believing they were enjoying simple, satisfying food. The smell alone made mouths water and kitchens feel like home. But nitrites react with proteins during cooking and digestion to form nitrosamines, compounds that researchers link to stomach cancer and other diseases. Studies showed that heavy consumption of processed meats carried real health consequences, especially for children whose smaller bodies absorbed higher relative doses. Regulators eventually imposed strict limits on nitrite levels and required manufacturers to add compounds that inhibit nitrosamine formation. The beloved deli meats of the past now carry warning labels. It is unsettling to realize that sandwiches packed with love once carried risks nobody thought to mention. Generic brand cola in 2-liter bottles was the unmistakable sign that your family knew how to stretch a holiday budget, and it sat on dinner tables across the country without apology. The labels were plain, the fonts were blocky, and the fizz never quite matched the famous brands everyone saw in commercials. But it was cold, it was sweet, and it filled glasses just as easily as anything else. Kids learned quickly not to mention the difference, because pointing it out only reminded everyone of what they could not afford. Parents poured it into pitchers or lined up the bottles along the counter as if presentation could erase the discount. Grandparents who remembered harder times never complained, because soda of any kind was a luxury they never had growing up. And somehow, after the first few sips, no one really cared anymore. The bubbles tickled the same, the sugar rush hit the same, and the laughter around the table drowned out any thoughts about labels. What mattered was that everyone had a glass in front of them and a plate full of food. Those bottles became part of the memory, not as something lesser, but as proof that celebration did not require a name brand. In the mid-1970s, energy efficiency was the new American dream. People wanted homes that stayed warm in winter and cool in summer without wasting money. That dream led to formaldehyde foam insulation, hailed as a cheap, cutting-edge solution. Contractors sprayed it into walls like miracle foam, sealing gaps in minutes. At first, homeowners were thrilled. Their houses felt warmer, the bills were smaller, and the air smelled faintly of newness. Then came the headaches, burning eyes, and nausea. The culprit? Toxic formaldehyde gas leaking into every room. What started as progress turned into panic. Families opened windows in the dead of winter, desperate for clean air, while government agencies scrambled to investigate. The foam was eventually banned, but its smell lingered in memory, a sharp reminder of how easily safety could be sold as innovation. The insulation meant to protect families instead turned their homes into slow, suffocating traps. Tinsel was supposed to go on the tree. It did not stay there. Those thin silver strands had a mind of their own. You draped them carefully, one strand at a time, like the box suggested, or you grabbed a fistful and threw it like confetti. Either way, tinsel ended up everywhere. On the carpet, on the couch, in your hair, wrapped around the cat. You would find it in random places for months. Behind the TV in February, stuck to a sock in March, one piece clinging to the back of a chair like it was hiding from the vacuum. Tinsel was not decoration. It was an infestation with a holiday theme. Some families used it sparingly. Others went full blizzard, layering it so thick you could barely see the ornaments underneath. Either way, it reflected every light in the room and made the tree shimmer like something from a movie. The cheap tinsel was paper-thin and tore if you looked at it wrong. The fancy stuff was heavier, shinier, and somehow ended up in your mouth at least once per season. Pets loved it, vacuums hated it, and no matter how careful you were during cleanup, at least one strand survived until Easter. Tinsel was chaos. Beautiful, sparkly, impossible to contain chaos, and you loved every strand of it. The slip and slide was one of those perfect summer toys, simple, cheap, and endlessly fun. All you needed was a patch of grass, a hose, and the courage to run full speed into a slick sheet of water. Kids could spend entire afternoons racing, sliding, and laughing in the sun. For children, it was harmless. But for adults who decided to join in, it was a disaster waiting to happen. The design was made for smaller, lighter bodies, and once grown-ups started throwing themselves down the slide, the results were catastrophic. Several adults were paralyzed or severely injured after hitting the ground too hard or stopping abruptly mid-slide. The company quickly issued warnings, plastering boxes with disclaimers that read, "For children only," but the damage was already done. Despite the danger, the slip and slide remained a summer staple, symbolizing both the freedom and recklessness of childhood. There was something pure about it, just water, plastic, and joy, until someone got hurt. It perfectly captured the spirit of the 1980s. Unfiltered fun with a hint of danger and a belief that nothing could go wrong. Looking back, the slip and slide feels like the ultimate metaphor for the era itself. Fast, thrilling, a little careless, and impossible to forget. Few images define mid-century America quite like the heavy, rounded refrigerator, gleaming white, humming softly, promising endless cold. By the 1970s, these models had become outdated, replaced by sleeker versions with automatic defrost. But as families upgraded, many of the old fridges ended up in garages, basements, or backyards, waiting for disposal. That is where tragedy often struck. These older models had airtight doors that sealed completely when closed, and no way to open them from the inside. For adventurous children playing hide-and-seek, they looked like the perfect hiding spot. Once the door shut, the heavy latch locked tight, trapping the child in total darkness with no air. Public service campaigns began warning parents to remove the doors before discarding old appliances, but too many ignored them, thinking it could never happen here. The horror stories that followed shook communities, search parties, frantic parents, and the unbearable realization of what those forgotten relics could do. It was not just the danger that was chilling, it was how preventable it was. Laws were eventually passed requiring manufacturers to design magnetic seals instead of mechanical locks, but the damage had already been done. Those old refrigerators, once symbols of prosperity and progress, became silent tombs scattered across suburban America. They stand now as a haunting reminder that even the most ordinary household upgrade can carry a hidden cost when safety comes second to convenience. Clackers were one of those toys that seemed harmless until you actually used them. 2 acrylic balls were attached to strings, and the goal was to swing them up and down in rhythm so they smacked together with a loud clack. Kids loved the sound and the challenge, spending hours perfecting the timing. Sometimes they would form small groups on driveways or at recess, each trying to master double or triple clacks while the others watched in awe. The plastic would heat from friction, adding an odd smell and a bit of smoke to the mix. But no one cared. It felt like an accomplishment. Even when their hands were sore and their wrists bruised, they kept going, determined to get that perfect sound. But anyone who owned a set knows what came next. Those plastic balls were made of hard, brittle material that could shatter under pressure. When they did, the pieces flew fast and sharp, right into faces, eyes, or walls. Parents tried to tape them up or replace them, but the danger was baked into the design. Eventually, schools and parents' groups began pushing for bans after a wave of injuries swept the country. Still, for many who grew up then, that loud rhythmic clicking brings back memories of hot summer afternoons and bruised knuckles. They were flashy, fun, and far too dangerous to survive the modern world. It looked like stained glass. It sat in a dish at Grandma's house, and it would absolutely destroy your mouth if you were not careful. Ribbon candy was beautiful and brutal. Thin, wavy, delicate strips of sugar in red, green, white, and gold. You picked one up carefully. Too much pressure, and it shattered. You brought it to your lips. One wrong angle and the edge sliced your tongue like a festive little razor blade. You winced. You kept eating, because ribbon candy was tradition, and you did not question tradition, even when it drew blood. It was always slightly stale. It stuck together in the dish. Pulling one piece free meant pulling 3, and at least one would crack in half and fall on the carpet. Kids ate it because it was pretty. Adults ate it because it reminded them of their childhood. No one ate it because it tasted amazing. But every year, there it was, sitting in the same cut glass dish, waiting to test your commitment to nostalgia. You survived it, you remember it, and you probably still flinch a little when you see it in a store. Kool-Aid packets for holiday punch lined the grocery aisle in rows of bright colors, each small envelope promising a full pitcher of sweetness for just a few cents. Families bought them by the dozen, mixing cherry with grape or orange with lemon to create signature blends that showed up at every holiday gathering throughout the season. The powder dissolved into tap water with a swirl of a wooden spoon, transforming something ordinary into something that looked almost festive when served in a glass bowl with ice cubes floating gently on top. Kids loved the bright colors and the sugar rush that followed every cup, completely unaware that the punch was standing in for sodas or juices that cost far more. Parents stirred in extra sugar to match the sweetness of store-bought drinks, and no one complained. The powder stained lips, fingers, and sometimes kitchen counters, but it also stained memories with something close to joy. Holiday punch made from Kool-Aid became a tradition in homes where creativity stretched further than cash, and the taste still triggers deep nostalgia for anyone who grew up watching that powder bloom into color. Potassium bromate bread rose high and golden in bakeries and home ovens throughout the 1980s, its perfect texture owing much to a chemical additive that made dough stronger and more elastic. Bakers loved how bromate improved rise, created finer crumb structure, and produced loaves that looked professionally crafted even from amateur kitchens. The additive became standard in commercial bread production, appearing in everything from sandwich loaves to hamburger buns without any indication on labels that consumers might want to know. Families ate this bread daily, trusting that anything sold so widely must be perfectly safe. But laboratory studies eventually connected potassium bromate to cancer in animals, raising serious questions about what it might do inside human bodies over years of consumption. Many countries banned the additive entirely, though it remained legal in the United States under the assumption that proper baking destroyed most of the chemical. The debate continues today, with many bakers choosing bromate-free recipes to avoid even theoretical risk. That perfect golden crust carries a complicated history few people ever learned. In the 1980s, children's jewelry kits filled with cadmium-coated beads were marketed as creative, hands-on fun. Kids spent afternoons stringing necklaces, making bracelets, and proudly wearing their creations to school. But inside those shiny beads was cadmium, a metal known today for its toxic effects, especially when handled frequently or placed in mouths. Children touched these beads constantly, sometimes even biting them to check their texture. The metallic finish felt smooth and exciting, and no one thought twice about how it was made. Parents loved these kits because they encouraged creativity and kept kids busy during long weekends or rainy days. When researchers later uncovered the dangers of cadmium exposure, the findings rattled families who suddenly questioned something so beloved. Regulators stepped in, bans were issued, and manufacturers scrambled to redesign their products. These once cherished craft kits now stand as a warning that beauty and danger can sometimes come wrapped in the same glittering package, and they remind us that childhood hobbies are not always as harmless as they appear. Aquadots were a toy that promised endless creativity with just a few drops of water, but they became infamous for an entirely different reason. The tiny, colorful beads could be arranged into shapes and designs, and when sprayed with water, they stuck together magically. Kids loved how simple and satisfying it was. Many children turned their kitchen tables into art studios, proudly crafting hearts, stars, and animals that shimmered like candy. The bright colors and glossy texture made them irresistible, even to toddlers who were too young to play safely. Parents praised the toys' creativity at first, never imagining that the harmless beads could turn into something so dangerous. But soon after their release, reports emerged that children were falling sick after swallowing the beads. Tests revealed that the coating contained a compound that turned toxic inside the body, producing a chemical similar to a date rape drug. Panic spread quickly among parents, and the product was pulled from store shelves worldwide. For many families, it was a wake-up call about how even the most innocent-looking toy could hide a sinister danger. The recall was massive, and Aquadots became a symbol of the dark side of 1980s-style creativity, colorful, exciting, and completely reckless. What was meant to be an art toy ended up in the history books as one of the most shocking product failures of the decade. Candy canes started out perfect, red and white, curved at the top, wrapped in cellophane like tiny holiday treasures. But within 48 hours, they became sticky nightmares. Someone left one on the coffee table, someone else unwrapped one and forgot about it. The cellophane fused to the candy fused to the surface beneath it. You peeled it off, and it took some varnish with it. Worse, it collected things: lint, pet hair, dust, a stray piece of tinsel. You found one under the couch in January that looked like it had been through a war. Eating one was a commitment. You licked it into a sharp point, then wondered if you were holding a weapon. You bit off the curve and regretted it immediately. Those shards were ruthless. Some people stirred them into hot cocoa. Some crunched them into cookies. Most just let them sit in a bowl until they welded themselves together into one solid peppermint brick. Candy canes were decoration and dessert and dental hazard all in one. You still see them every year. And somewhere, deep in your memory, you still feel that sticky pull. Every 1970s basement had that same glossy, cozy glow, the rich amber tones of wood paneling reflecting soft lamplight. It felt warm, modern, and safe, a place for games, television, and late-night gatherings. What families didn't realize was that the gleam came from sealants heavy with formaldehyde and volatile chemicals. These coatings, applied to preserve color and shine, slowly released invisible vapors into the air. The smell of new wood that so many found comforting was actually the scent of toxicity. People complained of sore throats, watery eyes, and fatigue, but chalked it up to the weather. Over time, the trapped fumes in poorly ventilated basements built up to alarming levels. Children played in that air. Adults napped on couches beside walls that quietly poisoned them. Manufacturers insisted their products were safe, calling the odors temporary, and even promoting them as proof of quality. Home improvement magazines praised the shine, never mentioning the danger. Years later, environmental health studies traced rising indoor pollution directly to those glossy walls. Many homeowners eventually ripped out their paneling, shocked by the chemicals that had lingered behind it for decades. Yet, despite its risks, the look became iconic. So tied to the decade that nostalgia sometimes makes people forget how hazardous it truly was. That inviting basement glow, once the symbol of American comfort, was really the reflection of fumes that refused to fade. Powdered milk for holiday baking was one of those quiet sacrifices that mothers made without ever drawing attention to it, stirring the white dust into water and hoping no one noticed. The cardboard box sat in the pantry like a secret, pulled out only when the recipe demanded milk and the refrigerator held none. Kids sometimes caught a glimpse of the mixing process and wrinkled their noses, but they still devoured the cookies that came out of the oven without complaint. Fresh milk was expensive, and in families where every dollar had a destination, wasting it on baking seemed reckless. Powdered milk stretched further, lasted longer, and never spoiled before you could use it. It showed up in cakes, frostings, puddings, and breads, blending into recipes where its presence was nearly invisible. Mothers learned tricks to mask the slight difference in taste, adding extra vanilla or a touch more sugar. And the truth is, most of the time, no one could tell. The cookies still disappeared, the cakes still earned praise, and the powdered milk box quietly returned to its shelf. It was never glamorous, never something families bragged about, but it kept traditions alive when fresh ingredients felt like luxuries. In the 1970s, a bright coat of paint was seen as the quickest way to freshen up a home. The walls glistened with color, the nursery looked cheerful, and even wooden toys were coated in glossy perfection. What no one realized was that beauty came with a cost, a quiet, invisible danger hiding in plain sight. Lead-based paint was everywhere, from cribs to kitchen walls, sold as durable and easy to clean. Families trusted it, unaware that each chip and flake released toxic dust that lingered in the air and settled on everything. Children, drawn to the bright colors, often ingested it without anyone knowing. By the time doctors began connecting developmental problems to lead exposure, millions of homes were already covered in the stuff. It took decades for regulations to catch up, and even then, the damage was done. This was the kind of danger that did not explode or burn. It simply stayed, poisoning quietly. Looking back now, it is haunting how something so ordinary became one of the most dangerous household hazards of its time. There was a moment every fall when it arrived. Thick as a phone book, glossy as a dream. The Sears Wish Book. Or maybe it was JCPenney. Either way, that catalog was not just paper. It was a portal. You flipped past the boring stuff, coats, tools, vacuum cleaners, until you hit the toy section. And then time stopped. You grabbed a pen, you circled, you starred, you dog-eared corners like you were marking buried treasure. Every page had something you needed. Not wanted, needed. The race car set, the dollhouse with working lights, the boombox, the electronic football game. You ranked them silently in your head. Must have, really want, and if there's a miracle. You left the catalog open to the exact page your parents needed to see, hoping they would take the hint without you having to beg. You studied the pictures like blueprints. You memorized item numbers. You compared features between two nearly identical toys and made life-altering decisions based on which one had more accessories. That catalog was your wish list, your vision board, your entire December personality. And when it got too beat up from use, you treated it like a wounded soldier, taped the spine, smoothed the pages, kept it alive until the big day. Today, kids scroll through websites, but you had a book, a heavy, magical, ink-smelling book of possibility. And honestly, you would still flip through one right now. Pogo balls were the natural next step in the 1980s bounce craze. A rubber disc with a ball in the center, it required balance, coordination, and a healthy disregard for gravity. Kids gripped it with their shoes and jumped until they inevitably fell. Neighborhoods turned into outdoor arenas with kids daring each other to see who could bounce the longest or the highest. The pogo ball squeaked loudly with every jump, creating a rhythm that could be heard down the block. Eventually, that sound meant one of two things: someone was having the time of their life, or someone was about to crash. When it worked, it felt like flying. When it did not, it was an instant faceplant. The grip tore easily, sending kids sprawling onto concrete or grass. Broken wrists, scraped knees, and bruised chins became badges of honor. Schools banned them after too many recess injuries, but that only made them more appealing. Like so many toys of the decade, the pogo ball blurred the line between fun and danger. Looking back, it is amazing anyone survived childhood intact, and even more amazing that we still look back on it all with a smile. In the 1980s, baby toys made from polyvinyl chloride softened with dangerous phthalates looked harmless, colorful, and cheerful. The kind of toys parents trusted without a second thought. Babies chewed on them, squeezed them, and carried them everywhere, and no one questioned what made the plastic so flexible or what happened when tiny teeth left marks behind. The truth was that the softeners inside those toys could leach out, especially when exposed to saliva, sunlight, or the kind of wear that came from being a child's constant companion. Parents had no idea that something so simple could carry long-term risks. Playpens, nurseries, and diaper bags were filled with these toys, each one marketed as safe, modern, and designed with comfort in mind. It took years before health researchers fully understood the hormonal dangers connected to those chemical softeners. By then, millions of homes had already cycled through dozens of these toys without knowing the consequences. When the bans came, they arrived with unsettling clarity, revealing that even the gentlest-looking items could hide risks you would never expect. And that realization shaped an entire generation's view of what safe for children truly meant. In the 1980s, alar-treated red apples were considered the pinnacle of perfect produce, shiny and beautiful in ways that seemed almost too good to be natural. Grocery stores stacked them in gleaming pyramids, and parents packed them proudly into lunchboxes, believing they were giving their children something wholesome and good. The chemical alar helped apples stay firm, develop that deep red color, and resist bruising during long truck rides across the country. Farmers loved it because it extended shelf life, and stores loved it because fruit looked irresistible under fluorescent lights. But when alar broke down during cooking or processing, it released a compound called UDMH, which researchers connected to cancer risks. Apple juice, applesauce, and baked goods made from treated fruit carried this invisible threat into kitchens everywhere. When findings became public, families threw out Apple products and demanded answers. Regulators banned alar from food production, but the damage to trust was done. It remains one of the starkest examples of how something sold as healthy can quietly carry dangers nobody imagined. Bagged cereal from the bottom shelf was one of those grocery aisle truths that every kid understood but never discussed outside the house. The bags were enormous compared to the name brand boxes sitting at eye level, puffed out with flakes, loops, or puffed rice that promised the same crunch at a fraction of the cost. The characters on the packaging looked slightly off, as if someone had drawn them from memory rather than reference. And the names were close enough to trigger recognition, but different enough to avoid lawsuits. Kids knew the difference the moment they saw a classmate unpack a lunchbox with a real brand tucked inside. But at home, that bag fed the family through an entire week of breakfasts and late-night snacks. Parents poured carefully to avoid crushing the flakes, and the plastic rustled loudly in the quiet of early mornings. Some kids learned to love it, finding comfort in the familiar crunch, even if the flavor sat just slightly to the left of expectation. Others said nothing, knowing that asking for the real thing meant admitting something they were not ready to say. The cereal filled the bowls either way. Few inventions felt more modern than non-stick cookware. Teflon promised freedom from scrubbing, stuck eggs, and greasy messes. Housewives and young couples alike embraced it as a symbol of convenience and progress. It was advertised as the perfect marriage of science and home life, sleek, spotless, and futuristic. The shine of those silver pans reflected an entire generation's faith in technology. But inside that slick surface lurked a chemical secret that no one could pronounce, much less understand. But what they did not know was that overheating a Teflon pan, something as simple as forgetting it on the stove, could release invisible toxic fumes. Birds dropped from their perches, families complained of dizziness and coughing. Manufacturers brushed it off, calling it harmless. Yet behind closed doors, scientists knew those fumes came from chemicals that could cause flu-like symptoms in humans and death in pets. The same coating that made cooking easier also made breathing more dangerous. Teflon was progress, but at a price no one could see. Looking back, it is unsettling how something designed to make life cleaner ended up polluting the very air of the American kitchen. It started innocently. Someone pulled the Christmas lights out of the attic. One box, then another, then a tangled nightmare of green cords, burnt-out bulbs, and sheer electrical chaos. Those old C9 lights were not delicate. They were weapons. Heavy glass bulbs that could heat a room or start a small fire if you left them on too long. And they were always tangled. You sat on the floor for what felt like hours, picking at knots that seemed to multiply. One strand wrapped around another. A bulb fell out. Someone stepped on it. You found a squirrel's nest in there once. Don't ask. And the whole time, your dad stood over you saying, "Just pull it gently," which helped exactly 0%. Every year, someone said, "We should wrap these better when we put them away." Every year, no one did. You tested each bulb by unscrewing it and plugging the strand in to see which one was dead. Sometimes it was 3. Sometimes it was 12. Sometimes the whole strand just gave up on life. But when they finally worked, when you plugged them in and the whole tree lit up in fat, glowing colors, that was Christmas. Those lights were not subtle. They were hot, bright, and proud. They made the whole room feel like something important was about to happen, and they stayed tangled in the box until next year. The Cabbage Patch Snack Time Kids doll was designed to be cute, interactive, and surprisingly hungry. Kids could feed it pretend snacks that disappeared into its mechanical mouth as the doll chewed with a quiet whirring sound. At first, it felt like magic, a toy that could eat on its own. But that magic quickly turned into horror for many children. The doll's motorized mouth had no off switch, and it did not know the difference between plastic food and real fingers. Countless kids learned that the hard way, getting their hair or fingertips caught in the doll's relentless jaws. Parents rushed to pull the batteries, but even that sometimes did not stop it. The manufacturer recalled the dolls after several injuries, but not before the Snack Time Kids had earned a spot in toy history for all the wrong reasons. Despite its creepy legacy, some collectors still keep them. A strange reminder of how wild 1980s toy innovation could be. The idea of a doll that eats might sound innocent, but when it starts chewing on you, the fun ends fast. When you think back to the 1980s, aerosol spray paint felt like one of those everyday marvels that made everything brighter and bolder. But behind that colorful cloud was something far more dangerous, because the pigments inside many of those cans were made with lead-based compounds, and that single detail changed everything. People used it without blinking an eye, coating bicycles, toys, school projects, and even furniture in a haze of neon charm. The funny thing is that the smell alone should have been a clue, because it lingered far longer than anything harmless should parents let kids help with art projects, shaking the can proudly and watching their creations come to life, unaware that tiny particles drifting in the air could quietly settle into lungs, carpets, and skin. Once scientists connected the dots between this kind of paint and serious health damage, the entire outlook changed overnight. Homes were suddenly filled with things that now came with whispered warnings instead of praise. Even simple crafts became symbols of an era that did not yet understand how dangerous its brightest ideas could be. And when regulators finally stepped in, the shock was real, because no one expected something so ordinary to carry that kind of hidden cost. Chlordane-contaminated poultry reached dinner tables across the country during the 1980s after the powerful pesticide worked its way through the food chain in ways nobody anticipated. Farmers used chlordane to control termites around barns, coops, and feed storage areas, believing the chemical stayed where it was applied. But chlordane was persistent, clinging to soil, drifting into water supplies, and accumulating in the fat of animals that consumed contaminated feed. Chickens absorbed it steadily, storing the pesticide in their tissues until concentrations alarmed health officials. Families roasted these birds for Sunday dinners, fried drumsticks for picnics, and served chicken salad at gatherings without suspecting anything wrong. When testing revealed widespread contamination, scandal rocked the poultry industry. Regulators banned chlordane from agricultural use, but trust in commercially raised chicken was shattered. It was a stark lesson in how chemicals meant for one purpose can travel invisibly through ecosystems, ending up exactly where they were never supposed to be, on the plates of unsuspecting families. Bologna by the pound from the deli counter was the unsung hero of holiday lunch duty, sliced thick or thin depending on how far the budget needed to stretch that week. The deli worker behind the glass would ask how much, and the answer often came after a quick mental calculation of how many sandwiches were needed before the next paycheck arrived. Kids ate it cold between slices of soft white bread slathered with yellow mustard, or fried in a cast-iron skillet until the edges curled upward and the surface turned golden brown. The smell of fried bologna drifting through the house became a signature scent of holiday break, as recognizable as pine trees or cinnamon sticks hanging in the kitchen. It was protein, it was affordable, and it filled bellies without complaint. Parents sliced it carefully, making each round last as long as possible, tucking it into school lunches and after-school snacks with quiet efficiency. Nobody advertised that they were eating bologna instead of roast beef or sliced turkey, but nobody hid it either. It was simply part of the rhythm of the season, a reliable friend in the refrigerator that never let anyone go hungry. Few things felt as luxurious in the 1970s as stepping into a bathroom lined with gleaming vinyl. The new plastic revolution promised cleanliness, color, and style, all for a few dollars. Vinyl shower curtains were the perfect finishing touch, offered in endless patterns from florals to flamingos. That distinctive new smell filled the bathroom, proof that you had upgraded to modern living. But that smell was not freshness, it was chemistry. Those fumes came from polyvinyl chloride, or PVC, slowly off-gassing toxins into every breath you took. The air grew thick with invisible chemicals that irritated lungs and caused dizziness, headaches, and nausea. Families thought it was just the humidity. In small bathrooms with poor ventilation, the fumes built up like invisible fog. Scientists later warned that the same compounds could cause long-term harm, but by then, vinyl had taken over the American home. It is unsettling to think that comfort came at the cost of breathing clean air. The 1970s promised a future made of plastic, and it delivered, for better and for worse. The He-Man power sword turned every backyard into a battlefield. Inspired by the cartoon hero himself, the hard plastic sword was big, bright, and built for action. Every child who held it shouted, "I have the power!" usually before whacking a sibling or neighbor. There was a kind of magic in that sword, especially when paired with the He-Man action figures in Saturday morning reruns. Kids wore makeshift capes made from bath towels and staged epic battles in the yard, believing they were saving the universe. Of course, those heroic duels often ended with someone crying, a broken toy, and a lecture from an exhausted parent. The sword's tough design meant it could take a beating, but that also meant it delivered one. Black eyes, bruised arms, and a few broken lamps later, parents started realizing this toy might have been too realistic. The problem was not just the sword, it was the energy it unleashed in every kid who wielded it. The toy was eventually reworked with softer plastic, but by then, countless kids had already discovered their inner warrior and their parents' limits for patience. It remains one of the most iconic but dangerous toy weapons of the decade, symbolizing both the imagination and chaos that defined 1980s playtime. There was always one kid. Maybe it was you, maybe it was your cousin, but someone somewhere peeked at the presents early. They snuck downstairs. They lifted a corner of wrapping paper. They shook boxes. They ruined the surprise, for themselves, and sometimes for everyone else. The confession usually came later. I already know what it is. 4 words that could destroy Christmas morning. You tried to act surprised anyway. You opened the gift with fake enthusiasm. You glared at the peeker, who shrugged like it was not their fault the closet door was unlocked. Some kids peeked and kept the secret. Some kids announced it to the entire family like they had broken a code. Either way, they changed the game. Parents got sneakier. They hid gifts at the neighbor's house. They wrapped decoys. They put fake names on tags just to throw off the investigation. And still, the peeker found a way. If you were the peeker, you know who you are. You carry that guilt every December. If you were the sibling of the peeker, you are still mad. And that is fair. It was on a lot. Like a lot. Home fog machines became a surprising hit in the 1980s, especially for birthday parties, Halloween gatherings, and school events where a little theatrical smoke seemed to transform any room into something magical. Kids danced through the mist, parents laughed and filmed with camcorders, and party hosts proudly showed off the machine that made everything feel larger than life. But many early fog machines relied on unsafe glycol mixtures that produced fumes far harsher than anyone realized. These solutions heated quickly, vaporizing into clouds meant to imitate stage effects, but the byproducts clung to carpets, furniture, and lungs. Parents assumed that if a product was sold in stores, it had to be safe for indoor use. Yet repeated exposure in enclosed spaces caused coughing, eye irritation, and respiratory distress, especially for children who spent the most time chasing the swirling clouds. When health experts alerted regulators to the risks, the bans arrived with urgency. Manufacturers were forced to redesign formulas, add safety warnings, and rethink what belonged in family homes. The shift was dramatic, transforming fog machines from beloved party accessories into cautionary examples of how easily entertainment can cross into danger. And today, the memory of those early machines lingers with a mix of nostalgia and unease, reminding us that even the most joyful moments can hide hazards no one sees until it is too late. Diethyl stilbestrol chicken reached dinner tables across the country during the 1980s, the synthetic hormone implanted in poultry to accelerate growth and increase profits for producers. Farmers embraced the technology because it meant birds reached market weight faster, reducing feed costs and speeding up production cycles. Consumers benefited from lower prices without questioning what made chicken so affordable and abundant. Families roasted whole birds for Sunday dinners, fried drumsticks for weeknight meals, and served chicken at nearly every gathering. The meat seemed wholesome and natural, a lean protein that health-conscious eaters preferred over red meat. But DES had already been connected to devastating health effects in humans, causing cancer and reproductive problems in children whose mothers took the hormone during pregnancy. When researchers found residues in poultry, the implications were deeply troubling. Regulators banned hormone implants in chicken production, though the damage to public trust was significant. The affordable chicken that families had eaten for years suddenly seemed far less innocent than anyone had imagined. Government cheese in the orange box was one of the most recognizable symbols of stretching through hard times, a dense golden block that arrived through commodity programs and sat heavily in the hands of whoever carried it home. The cheese itself was rich, creamy, and melted into everything with an almost aggressive smoothness that store-bought cheese could never match. Families sliced it for sandwiches, cubed it for snacking, and grated it over casseroles that stretched ground beef into meals for 6. There was no pretending about where it came from, and kids often saw the orange box sitting on the counter before it was quickly tucked away. Some families felt embarrassed picking it up, standing in lines at distribution centers while hoping no neighbors drove by. But once the cheese hit the pan, sizzling into grilled sandwiches or bubbling over macaroni, the shame dissolved into something closer to gratitude. It tasted better than it had any right to, and many adults still chase that particular flavor without realizing where the memory began. Government cheese fed families when paychecks fell short, and it did so without apology. When electric can openers hit kitchens in the 1970s, they felt like magic. No more struggling with sharp manual tools. Just press a button and let the machine do the work. But hidden beneath that convenience was a design nightmare. The exposed metal gears rotated fast, strong enough to slice through aluminum, and anything else that got in the way. Long hair, loose sleeves, necklaces, even curious fingers were no match. One wrong move and a simple dinner prep could turn into a trip to the emergency room. The ads never mentioned that part. They focused on the elegance, the ease, the touch of class. Housewives were encouraged to keep them right on the counter for guests to see. The irony, of course, is that beauty met brutality in a single appliance. The electric can opener was the perfect metaphor for the 1970s kitchen. Sleek, mechanical, and just a little too dangerous. It changed dinner forever, but not without leaving a few scars along the way. Lawn darts were the kind of toy that made parents nervous for good reason. Marketed as a fun family game, they were basically long, heavy darts with pointed metal tips that you tossed into the air toward plastic rings on the ground. The idea was simple: hit the target, score a point, celebrate. The reality, though, was far from safe. Those darts could come down like miniature spears, embedding themselves in lawns, decks, and sometimes people. Families loved playing them at barbecues and backyard gatherings, and most assumed nothing bad could happen, until it did. Hospitals began reporting cases of serious head injuries and even deaths. In one tragic instance, a young boy was struck in the skull, leading to the nationwide outcry that finally got the toy pulled from shelves. Despite being banned, many households kept their sets hidden away, unable to part with the nostalgia. Looking back, it is almost unbelievable that something so lethal was once sold as harmless fun. It was a symbol of a fearless decade when danger and excitement often came in the same package. Kids in the 1980s adored sticker kits, especially the ones that came with their own glue made from toluene-based solvents. The colors were bright, the patterns fun, and the excitement of crafting felt completely innocent, but inside each bottle of glue was a chemical strong enough to cause dizziness, nausea, and long-term neurological concerns when inhaled. Children used these kits on bedroom floors, classroom desks, and library tables, often leaning close as they brushed on the sweet-smelling adhesive. Parents and teachers rarely questioned the scent, assuming all craft supplies were harmless by default. Kids believed the smell meant the glue was high quality. Over time, reports surfaced about the effects of prolonged exposure, and it became clear that these kits were far more dangerous than anyone imagined. By the time regulators stepped in, countless children had used them in ways that now feel unnerving to remember. The bans came swiftly, replacing these adhesives with safer alternatives that lacked the signature smell older generations still recall. And today, these once beloved sticker sets stand as a reminder of how easily danger can hide inside the most cheerful childhood memories. Ethylene dibromide fumigated flour sat in pantries and bakery stockrooms across the country during the 1980s, quietly contaminating bread, cakes, cookies, and pastries that families trusted as perfectly safe. The chemical was used to fumigate stored grain, killing insects and preventing infestations that could ruin entire harvests. Farmers and processors saw it as essential protection, a modern solution to ancient problems of spoilage and pest damage. Nobody thought twice about what happened when fumigated grains were milled into flour and shipped to grocery stores. But ethylene dibromide did not simply vanish during processing. Residues remained in finished products, and researchers discovered the chemical was a confirmed carcinogen capable of causing serious harm with repeated exposure. When the EPA banned the fumigant, the announcement sent ripples through the entire grain industry. Bakers, millers, and consumers questioned everything on their shelves. It was a jarring reminder that contamination can travel invisibly from field to fork, and that even bread, the most basic food, could carry dangers nobody saw coming. Tang powder for Christmas morning drinks turned tap water into something that felt almost festive, even if it never quite matched the brightness of real orange juice. The jar sat on the counter with its bold orange lid, scooped out carefully so the powder did not cloud the air and land on everything nearby. Kids stirred their glasses with enthusiasm, watching the crystals dissolve into something that tasted like citrus mixed with sugar and nostalgia. Fresh juice was expensive, especially around the holidays when everyone wanted it, and Tang offered a compromise that stretched further and lasted longer. Astronauts drank it in space, or at least that is what the commercials claimed, and that fact alone gave it a certain credibility that orange juice could never match. Parents served it in plastic cups during holiday breakfasts, and no one complained because the sweetness made everything feel brighter. The tang on the tongue, the faint chemical aftertaste that some people secretly loved, became part of the season itself. Kids did not realize they were drinking a budget substitute. To them, it was simply what Christmas morning tasted like, and that memory lingered long after the jar was empty. Nothing said comfort like curling up under an electric blanket on a cold night. They were luxury and warmth rolled into one, a modern marvel for the modern family. But early models had a dangerous flaw: poor wiring. Wires frayed inside the fabric, sparks flew, and fires started in the middle of the night. The cozy hum of electricity felt like progress itself. No more cold sheets or frosty mornings. But inside those blankets, tangled wires rubbed and wore thin with each use, turning comfort into kindling. One overheated coil could transform a peaceful night into a blaze that consumed the very bed it was meant to warm. What was supposed to be comfort became catastrophe. People trusted their blankets to keep them safe and warm, not realizing that one flick of the switch could ignite the bed beneath them. Manufacturers eventually added safety switches and temperature controls, but not before tragedy struck countless homes. The danger of electric blankets was quiet but terrifying. It lived in the very object meant to bring comfort. Even now, some still remember that faint electrical smell, the hum of danger disguised as luxury. Christmas dinner meant one thing: a house full of people you sort of recognized. Great aunts with strong perfume, uncles who asked the same questions every year, cousins you only saw once in December and once in summer, if at all. You said hello, you accepted cheek kisses. You answered, "School's fine." There were too many people and not enough chairs. Kids sat at the kid table, which was either a card table in the corner or the coffee table in the living room. You balanced a plate on your knee and tried not to spill gravy on the carpet. Someone always told a long story you did not understand. Someone else fell asleep on the couch before dessert. The food was abundant: turkey, ham, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole with those crunchy onions on top, rolls that someone forgot in the oven, and pie, always pie, in at least 3 flavors. You ate until you could not move. Then someone handed you another plate. It was loud. It was chaotic. It was uncomfortable in the best possible way. Because even when you did not know everyone's name, you knew you belonged. And that was the whole point of the season. Toy cap guns were a staple of every 1980s backyard. They came in shiny metal finishes that looked shockingly real, complete with loud pops of smoke when you pulled the trigger. For generations, they symbolized adventure and imagination. But in the 1980s, realism went too far. The metal look was so convincing that police officers began mistaking the toy for actual firearms. Several tragic incidents occurred when children or teens were confronted while playing, leading to national outrage and urgent calls for regulation. Orange tips were later added to distinguish toy guns from real ones, but the damage had been done. What was once harmless play had turned deadly serious. The cap gun debate became one of the most emotional toy controversies of the decade, forcing America to question how far realism should go in the name of fun. It was a sobering reminder that some games can blur the line between fantasy and danger far too easily. In the 1980s, disposable contact lenses felt like a revolution, offering comfort and clarity without the constant cleaning routine older lenses required. But many early versions used mercury-based preservatives in their storage solutions, a detail most users never knew. People put these lenses in their eyes daily, trusting that anything sold in an optical store must be completely safe. The truth, however, was that repeated exposure to mercury-based solutions posed risks to eye health and overall well-being. Users reported irritation, dryness, or discomfort, but few connected these symptoms to the preservative itself. When researchers uncovered the connection, the findings created a wave of concern across the industry. Bans followed, and safer alternatives replaced the old formulas quickly. Looking back, it seems shocking that something meant to enhance vision carried such hidden danger. And it reinforces the idea that innovation sometimes arrives before safety fully catches up. Mercury-laden swordfish and tuna were prized catches on dinner tables throughout the 1980s, served as elegant steaks at restaurants and sliced into sandwiches for everyday lunches. These large, predatory fish were celebrated for their firm texture, rich flavor, and reputation as healthy protein sources loaded with omega fatty acids. Families ordered them proudly at seafood counters, grilled them at backyard barbecues, and packed tuna salad into lunchboxes without any hesitation. The ocean seemed like an endless source of pure, natural food, untouched by the contamination problems plaguing land-based agriculture. But mercury accumulates in fish that eat smaller fish, concentrating as it moves up the food chain until top predators carry levels dangerous to human health. Pregnant women, children, and frequent consumers were especially vulnerable to neurological damage that could take years to manifest. When testing revealed how contaminated these popular fish had become, regulators issued consumption advisories that shocked families who thought they were eating healthy. Today, strict warnings limit how often these fish should appear on anyone's plate. Imitation vanilla extract sat on spice racks in small brown bottles that looked almost identical to the real thing, fooling no one who knew the difference but saving dollars that mattered more than flavor. The liquid inside smelled sweeter, sharper, and somehow less warm than pure vanilla, but it disappeared into cookie dough and cake batter without anyone at the table ever noticing. Mothers who baked through the holidays used it generously, knowing that the cookies would still vanish and the cakes would still earn compliments regardless of what the bottle actually contained. Real vanilla was expensive, a luxury reserved for people who did not have to check prices before dropping something into the cart. Imitation vanilla was the quiet compromise, the ingredient that let holiday traditions continue without breaking the budget. Kids licked spoons coated in batter and never questioned the source of the sweetness. The cookies came out golden, the frosting tasted rich, and the memories formed around kitchen tables where the smell of baking filled every room. Nobody cared whether the vanilla was real as long as the love behind it was unmistakable. Backyard games were a staple of the 1970s, and lawn darts, known as jarts, were the ultimate crowd pleaser. Big, colorful darts that you tossed toward a plastic ring in the grass. It sounded harmless enough. Families loved them. Picnics, reunions, and barbecues were not complete without a set. But those darts were heavy, sharp, and made of solid metal. A single misthrow could and did cause devastating injuries. Television commercials showed fathers and sons laughing as the darts soared through the air, never showing what happened when they missed. The tips, designed to stick into the ground, were strong enough to pierce skin, bone, even skulls. What began as family fun turned into a national debate over whether danger could ever be part of the game. For years, warnings went ignored. Advertisers showed smiling families, barefoot kids, and perfect summer skies. Behind the fun, hospitals were reporting accidents nationwide. Eventually, the government stepped in, banning them altogether. It is strange how something meant to bring families together ended up tearing so many apart. Today, lawn darts remain a reminder that even the most innocent games can turn deadly when safety takes a back seat. Creepy crawlers. Thingmaker sets gave kids the thrill of feeling like real inventors, or maybe mad scientists. The concept was simple. Pour liquid plastic into metal molds, heat it up, and watch colorful bugs and creatures take shape. The problem? The molds were scorching hot, and the liquid plastic reached dangerously high temperatures. The entire set came with little safety beyond parental supervision and a brave spirit. Many kids ended up with minor burns, and a few had far worse injuries. Still, that smell of melted plastic and the thrill of pulling a perfect worm from the mold was unforgettable. Parents called it creativity. Safety officials called it negligence. Eventually, the manufacturer redesigned the toy with safer heating systems, but by then, the original had already earned its place as a legend among risky 1980s crafts. Looking back, it is shocking that anyone thought a 400-degree mold belonged in a child's bedroom. But then again, that was part of the charm of growing up in an era where danger and imagination were inseparable. Frozen juice concentrate in the small cardboard cans sat in freezers waiting to be mixed into pitchers of something that almost tasted like fresh squeezed. The frozen cylinder slid out with a satisfying thunk, landing in the pitcher before tap water dissolved it into something sweet and bright. Kids stirred enthusiastically, watching the orange or grape or lemonade color spread through the water like magic happening in their own kitchen. Fresh juice was expensive and spoiled quickly, but concentrate lasted for months in the freezer and stretched into multiple servings that cost a fraction of the real thing. Parents served it at breakfast, packed it in thermoses for school lunches, and poured it at holiday gatherings where nobody questioned what they were drinking. The taste was sweeter than fresh, more consistent, and perfectly acceptable to kids who had never known the difference anyway. Those little cans became a staple of morning routines in homes where every dollar mattered. The juice did its job without pretense, filling glasses and filling the gap between what families wanted and what they could actually afford. Some families had a rotating tree stand, not just any stand, a motorized musical one that slowly spun the tree while playing a tinny version of O Tannenbaum on a loop. It sounded like a music box that had seen better days. It creaked, it wobbled, it played the same 12 notes over and over until someone in the house quietly lost their mind. But it looked amazing. The tree would turn slowly, catching the light from every angle. Ornaments sparkled. Tinsel shimmered. You sat there mesmerized, watching the same side come around again and again like a very slow, very festive carousel. And the song? You did not even hear it anymore after the first 100 plays. It just became the background hum of Christmas. The motor was not strong. If you overloaded one side of the tree with ornaments, it would stop mid-spin and groan like it was giving up. You had to redistribute the weight like you were balancing a science project. Sometimes the music slowed down when the batteries got weak, turning the cheerful tune into something that sounded vaguely haunted. You changed the batteries. You kept it spinning. Because a spinning tree was fancy. It meant your family had arrived. And even now, if you hear that tune, you are right back in the living room, watching the lights go round and round. Mood rings were one of the great novelties of the 1970s, a wearable science experiment that promised to reveal your emotions through color. Everyone from teenagers to suburban moms slipped one on, fascinated by the shifting hues. The idea felt magical. The ring read your body temperature, turning blue for calm, green for balance, black for stress. What the ads never mentioned was that the so-called miracle material inside the glass dome was far from harmless. The liquid crystals that caused the color changes were mixed with trace metals and chemicals that could irritate skin and, in some cases, burn it after prolonged contact. Cheap imports flooded the market, cutting corners with untested materials and leaving users with blistered fingers instead of enlightenment. The metal bands, often made of inexpensive alloys, triggered allergic reactions or left green stains that lingered for days. Parents shrugged it off as part of the fun, unaware of the chemical cocktail pressed against their children's skin. It was a perfect symbol of the decade, half science, half spectacle, and entirely unregulated. For a generation obsessed with self-expression, the mood ring seemed harmless, even profound. Yet behind its charm was a chemical experiment no one should have been wearing. Looking back, it feels less like a peek into one's emotions and more like a reminder that the 1970s loved flirting with danger, even when it fit on a finger. The Slinky was one of those timeless toys that seemed impossible to mess up until you took it to the stairs. The metal Slinky, shiny and hypnotic, looked innocent enough sitting in its box. Kids would set it on the top step, give it a nudge, and watch it tumble gracefully downward, bouncing in rhythm. But that grace often turned violent when the toy recoiled too fast or got tangled mid-fall. The tightly coiled metal could whip back at lightning speed, snapping wrists, catching fingers, or even smacking a face hard enough to leave welts. Many children learned to duck the moment it started to misfire, but by then, it was usually too late. The toy also had a habit of tangling itself into impossible knots, leading frustrated kids to pull at the sharp coils until they cut their hands. Despite the hazards, the Slinky remained a household favorite, even as parents quietly cursed its unpredictable nature. Plastic versions eventually replaced the metal ones, but they never had the same bounce or the same sense of risk. The metal Slinky taught an entire generation one unforgettable lesson. Even the simplest toy could turn into a weapon when gravity got involved. Lead crystal baby drinking cups were prized gifts in the 1980s, often given at baby showers or christenings with a sense of tradition and elegance. The sparkling glass seemed refined, something families believed would be treasured for years. But the lead inside these cups could leach into liquids, especially warm drinks, creating a risk no parent would knowingly accept. Many families proudly displayed these cups or even used them for special occasions, unaware of the danger. Some babies drank juice or milk from them, while adults admired the craftsmanship without questioning the material. It took years before researchers made the connection clear, and once they did, the truth spread quickly. The bans followed, and these once precious keepsakes became hazardous heirlooms tucked away in storage boxes. Looking back, it is unsettling to realize how something meant to symbolize love and tradition could conceal such risk. And today, these cups serve as a reminder that beauty sometimes hides dangers we only discover long after the memories are made. Sodium cyclamate. Sweetened drinks were everywhere in the 1980s, filling refrigerators and vending machines with diet sodas that promised guilt-free refreshment. The artificial sweetener tasted remarkably close to sugar, lacked the bitter aftertaste of alternatives, and helped calorie-conscious consumers enjoy drinks without weight gain associated with regular soda. Families stocked cases of these beverages, and dieters relied on them as essential tools in weight management. The sweeteners seemed like a perfect solution to growing concerns about sugar and obesity. But cyclamate had already been banned in the United States back in 1969 after studies linked it to bladder cancer in laboratory animals. Despite ongoing debates about those findings, the ban remained firmly in place. Many consumers had no idea they were consuming something prohibited when they purchased imported products or traveled abroad. The controversy highlighted how differently nations approached food safety. Today, cyclamate remains forbidden in the United States, a quiet reminder that what tastes sweet can sometimes carry bitter consequences. Day-old bread from the discount rack was one of those grocery store secrets that families guarded carefully, arriving early to grab the best loaves before anyone else noticed them. The bread sat in a separate section, marked down because it had passed its peak freshness by a single day, even though it tasted perfectly fine for toast, sandwiches, and French toast casseroles. Kids never knew the difference when their lunch sandwiches came wrapped in wax paper, and parents never mentioned the savings that added up loaf after loaf. The crust was slightly firmer, the center still soft enough for peanut butter to spread without tearing, and the price made room for other things the family needed. Some mothers turned it into bread pudding, croutons, or stuffing that stretched holiday meals further than fresh loaves ever could. There was no shame in the discount rack, only practicality dressed up as resourcefulness. Families learned to see value where others saw expiration dates, and those marked-down loaves fed more holiday breakfasts than anyone ever counted. The bread did its job without complaint, and so did the people who carried it home. In the 1970s were the golden age of smoking, and no living room was complete without a table lighter. These were not small, disposable lighters. They were heavy, shiny, and built to impress. Designed to match the decor, they came in shapes of globes, statues, even miniature cars. Guests admired them, often flicking them on just to watch the flame dance. But they were fire waiting for a moment of curiosity. Children loved the bright designs and could easily light them, sometimes with disastrous results. Couch fires, burns, and even house blazes all started with these conversation pieces. Yet advertisements celebrated them as signs of class and sophistication. The line between luxury and danger blurred completely. The problem was not just the flame, it was how normal it seemed to have fire sitting in the center of family life. Smoking table lighters are a perfect snapshot of the 1970s. Bold, beautiful, and oblivious to the risk smoldering right under the surface. Magnetic building sets were the kind of toy that made kids feel like engineers. With tiny magnets inside colorful rods and metal balls, you could build towers, bridges, and geometric shapes that defied gravity. The concept was brilliant, until those tiny magnets started falling out. When swallowed, multiple magnets could attract inside the intestines, pinching and tearing through tissue. Doctors called the injuries horrific, and emergency surgeries skyrocketed. Parents who once saw the sets as educational now viewed them as silent threats. Eventually, stricter safety standards forced toy companies to redesign magnetic parts completely, sealing them away from small hands. Even so, these sets remain infamous reminders that some of the most fascinating toys also carried hidden dangers. They captured the 1980s perfectly, creative, intelligent, and just a little too risky for comfort. TBS ran A Christmas Story for 24 hours straight, and somehow you watched it at least 5 times in one sitting. Not on purpose, you just kept walking past the TV and getting sucked back in. Ralphie, the leg lamp, the tongue on the flagpole. You'll shoot your eye out. You said it to your siblings. You said it at school. You said it for months after Christmas was over. The movie became part of your vocabulary. The pink bunny suit, the soap in the mouth, the furnace battle. It was not just a film. It was a shared language. Everyone knew the scenes. Everyone had a favorite. The movie captured something real. Not perfect Christmases, messy ones, chaotic ones where the turkey got destroyed and the dad cursed at the furnace. You saw your family in that family. You recognized the frustration, the hope, the disappointment, and the joy. And you watched it every single year. Not because you had to, because it felt like home. And that leg lamp? Still iconic. Mothballs made with pure naphthalene were common in closets and drawers throughout the 1980s. Their sharp, unmistakable smell drifted through coats, blankets, and storage chests, signaling that clothes would stay protected from pests. But naphthalene vapor, especially in enclosed spaces, posed dangers few families understood at the time. People placed these little white spheres everywhere, believing the smell alone meant their belongings were safe. Children found them fascinating and sometimes handled them out of curiosity, unaware that even touching or breathing near them carried real risks. Studies eventually connected prolonged exposure to respiratory and blood-related problems, sparking concern across entire neighborhoods. When the bans and regulations arrived, they arrived with the weight of hard evidence. Suddenly, those tiny spheres, once associated with tidiness and practicality, became symbols of a decade that trusted chemicals far more than it should have. Their legacy lingers as a reminder that not everything designed to protect us truly does. Raw milk sold openly in grocery stores felt like a wholesome throwback during the 1980s, something that connected modern families to simpler dairy traditions their grandparents knew. Cartons sat beside pasteurized options, marketed as more natural, more nutritious, and closer to the way milk was meant to be consumed. Health enthusiasts praised its enzymes and unprocessed purity, believing heat treatment destroyed things that made milk beneficial. Families poured it over cereal, gave it to children, and used it in recipes without imagining any threat lurking inside. But raw milk carried bacteria that pasteurization was designed to destroy, including Salmonella, E. coli, and Listeria, organisms capable of causing severe illness or death. Outbreaks linked to unpasteurized dairy mounted as families fell sick, some suffering permanent damage while others did not survive. State after state began banning retail sales, and federal regulators prohibited raw milk from crossing state lines. The drink that symbolized natural living became a public health battleground. Today, it remains illegal in most places, a reminder that tradition and safety do not always walk together. Ramen noodles by the case-filled pantry shelves as the ultimate backup meal that never let a family down during the lean weeks of winter. The small square packages cost almost nothing, and each one promised a hot bowl of salty broth and soft noodles in less time than it took to set the table. Kids ate them after school, parents ate them for quick lunches, and sometimes the whole family gathered around bowls of steaming ramen when the grocery budget had stretched as far as it could go. The flavor packets dissolved into boiling water with a swirl that turned plain noodles into something that felt like a real meal. Some families added eggs, vegetables, or slices of leftover meat to stretch the nutrition further without spending another dime. The packaging was simple, the ingredients were basic, and the satisfaction was immediate. Ramen became a symbol of making do, of creativity born from necessity, and of meals that filled bellies even when the refrigerator held almost nothing else. Those small packages carried families through hard weeks without complaint, proving that survival could taste surprisingly good. There was no photo mode, no filter, no retake. You opened a gift, and someone pointed a Polaroid camera at your face. Flash, click, whir, and then you waited. The photo slid out of the camera like a secret. You shook it, even though you were not supposed to. You watched the image slowly appear, ghostly at first, then sharper, then frozen in time. You in your pajamas, wrapping paper everywhere. A look on your face that was either joy, confusion, or mid-sneeze. It did not matter. It was real. Polaroids were instant and imperfect, slightly overexposed, a little blurry. Sometimes someone's thumb was in the corner. But they were magic. You passed them around the room. You laughed at the bad ones. You tucked the good ones into albums or stuck them on the fridge. There was no delete button. What you captured, you kept. Even the disasters. Now photos live in phones, thousands of them. Perfect lighting, no waiting. But nothing feels like holding that little white square and watching Christmas morning develop right in your hand. Paraquat weed killer was a staple in 1980s hardware stores, sold in bright bottles that promised fast results for stubborn weeds. Home gardeners used it liberally on lawns, driveways, and vegetable beds, unaware that a single accidental sip or a splash on skin carried life-threatening risks. The chemical acted quickly, burning plants down to their roots, and homeowners saw that as efficiency rather than a warning. People poured it into sprayers without gloves, mixed it into diluted solutions, and stored it in sheds that were far too easy for children to access. It took years of medical reports and research before the gravity of paraquat exposure fully surfaced. Once it did, regulators moved decisively, banning or restricting the product across the country. Families looked back and realized they had handled something far more dangerous than they ever imagined. What once felt like a convenient fix for weekend yard work became one of the clearest symbols of how toxic the decade's quick solutions could be. Sulfite-preserved restaurant salad bars were the crown jewels of casual dining in the 1980s. Those long, gleaming counters overflowing with crisp lettuce, vegetables, and toppings that seemed impossibly fresh. Families lined up with plates in hand, thrilled by endless variety and the illusion of healthy eating. What diners did not realize was that many restaurants sprayed produce with sulfite solutions to keep everything looking vibrant long past its natural shelf life. The chemicals stopped browning and allowed vegetables to sit under heat lamps for hours without wilting. It seemed like a miracle of food science. But sulfites triggered severe reactions in certain people, especially those with asthma, causing breathing difficulties and, in tragic cases, death. Reports of allergic emergencies mounted until regulators could no longer ignore the pattern. The FDA banned sulfite sprays on fresh fruits and vegetables served raw, forcing restaurants to rethink salad bar practices entirely. That gleaming buffet of the past carries a shadow most people never knew existed, a reminder that freshness can sometimes be a dangerous illusion. Calamus-flavored bitters and tonics added a distinctive spicy sweetness to cocktails, digestive remedies, and herbal preparations throughout the 1980s. The root extract had been prized for centuries in traditional medicine and flavoring, lending complexity to drinks that bartenders and home mixologists crafted with pride. People sipped these bitters believing they aided digestion, settled stomachs, and provided medicinal benefits that justified their sharp, aromatic taste. The bottles sat behind bars and in medicine cabinets, their contents trusted as both flavorful and functional. But calamus contains a compound called beta-acerone, which researchers identified as a carcinogen capable of causing tumors in laboratory studies. When regulators examined the evidence, they banned calamus from food and beverage use entirely, removing an ingredient that had flavored drinks for generations. Bartenders reformulated classic recipes, and herbal remedy makers found alternatives that provided similar flavors without the cancer risk. Those old bottles of bitters now serve as reminders that even ingredients with centuries of traditional use can harbor dangers that only modern science could reveal. In the 1980s, recording something off the TV was an event. You needed a blank VHS tape, you needed to program the VCR, and you needed to pray that no one accidentally hit record over your copy of Rudolph. Christmas specials were prized recordings. You pressed record right as the show started, sat perfectly still so you would not bump the machine, and hoped the tape had enough room. If you were lucky, you got the whole thing. Plus the commercials, which became part of the experience. You watched those same toy ads every year, long after the toys were discontinued. They were part of the memory. Some families had a whole library of holiday tapes, labeled in marker, stacked by the TV. You could watch Frosty in July if you wanted, though it felt slightly illegal. The tracking was never quite right. The picture wobbled. Sometimes the audio buzzed, but it was yours. You rewound before every viewing. That was the rule. And when the tape wore out from too many plays, you mourned it like a friend. Streaming killed the VHS Christmas tape. But nothing will ever replace the feeling of sliding that cassette into the machine, hearing the click, and watching the static clear into something magical. You earned those recordings. You protected them. And somewhere, in a box in your parents' attic, one might still be waiting. Summer in the 1970s meant cookouts, citronella candles, and metal lawn chairs. Light, foldable, and cheap, they were everywhere, from family picnics to backyard barbecues. Their colorful vinyl straps looked cheerful, but after hours in the sun, the metal frames turned scorching hot. Sitting down too quickly meant an instant burn. The straps, too, were unpredictable, aging under heat and sunlight until they snapped mid-sit, sending people crashing to the ground. Yet, despite the bruises and blisters, families kept buying them year after year. The ads sold comfort and style, but they forgot to mention the risk of scorched skin or sudden collapse. Every backyard had a few battle-scarred survivors with melted straps and warped legs, still waiting for one more summer. In a way, those chairs embodied the 1970s spirit, colorful, disposable, and just a little dangerous. They were symbols of togetherness and simplicity, even as they wobbled beneath the weight of trust. Looking back, it is amazing how something so ordinary could hurt so many and still be remembered fondly. White bread from the economy loaf sat soft and squishy in its plastic sleeve, ready to become sandwiches, toast, or the foundation of whatever meal needed stretching that day. The slices were thinner than premium brands, the texture slightly more air than substance, but they held peanut butter, bologna, and sliced cheese just fine. Kids never complained because white bread was simply what bread looked like in their world, and the softness made it easy to eat without fighting through crusts or dense whole grains. Parents bought the largest loaves they could find, knowing that a single bag needed to last through an entire week of lunches, breakfasts, and after-school snacks for the whole family. The bread went stale faster than fancier options, but it rarely had the chance to sit that long before every slice was gone. Some families toasted every slice to mask the slight staleness that crept in toward the end of the week. Others made French toast, bread pudding, or croutons when the loaf started to turn. Nothing was wasted because nothing could afford to be wasted, and that economy loaf understood its assignment perfectly. In the 1980s, the Make-and-Bacon microwavable tray was one of the decade's quirkiest kitchen gadgets, promising crisp bacon without the hassle of a stove. Families loved the novelty of watching strips hang over plastic bars as grease dripped neatly below. It seemed like the perfect shortcut for busy mornings, after-school snacks, or weekend breakfasts when everyone wanted something fast and satisfying. But the plastic used in these trays was never designed to withstand repeated high heat, and over time, it released harmful compounds that seeped into food. People had no idea that the convenience they prized came with a hidden chemical cost. Parents let kids microwave bacon on their own, believing the tray made the process safer. The smell filled kitchens, the taste felt familiar, and no one thought twice about what might be mixing into those sizzling strips. Reports eventually surfaced about the dangers of certain plastics breaking down in microwaves, prompting alarm among families who had relied on the tray for years. Regulators banned the unsafe formulations, and manufacturers quietly shifted designs. But the legacy of the Make-and-Bacon tray lives on as one of the clearest examples of how the pursuit of convenience can blind consumers to the risks hiding beneath new inventions. And it reminds us that even the most harmless-looking kitchen toy can carry consequences no one imagined when they first brought it home. Trans-fat hydrogenated shortenings were the secret behind flaky pie crusts, crispy fried foods, and packaged snacks that stayed fresh for months throughout the 1980s. Manufacturers loved partially hydrogenated oils because they extended shelf life, improved texture, and cost far less than butter or natural fats. Families baked with these shortenings, fried chicken in them, and consumed them in countless processed foods without any idea that something so common could be harmful. The creamy white blocks sat in pantries beside flour and sugar, treated as essential baking supplies. But trans fats proved devastating to cardiovascular health, raising bad cholesterol while lowering good cholesterol in ways that dramatically increased heart disease risk. Researchers connected these artificial fats to thousands of preventable deaths each year, making them one of the most dangerous ingredients ever allowed in the food supply. Regulators eventually moved to phase out trans fats entirely, forcing manufacturers to reformulate products unchanged for decades. The shortenings that once made baked goods irresistible now carry a legacy of health consequences that took far too long to recognize. Electric blankets of the 1980s were the kind of household comfort that felt almost magical during cold nights. You plugged them in, switched them on, and warmth spread across the bed like a soft wave. But inside, many of those blankets ran unshielded wiring that was never designed to withstand years of bends, folds, and nightly use. Families trusted them implicitly, draping them over mattresses, wrapping them around cold feet, and leaving them on for hours at a time. Over time, the insulation around the wires could degrade, exposing live electrical elements that created real fire hazards. Reports of sparks, smoke, and burns slowly began to surface, and investigators traced the cause back to the wiring inside the blankets themselves. When regulators intervened, entire product lines were recalled, leaving families to confront just how close they had come to disaster while simply trying to stay warm. The bans brought new safety standards, temperature sensors, and automatic shutoff systems that are now considered essential features. Looking back, it is startling to remember how casually people once used something that could fail so catastrophically. And today, those early electric blankets remain a powerful reminder that even the gentlest forms of comfort can hide dangers that smolder just beneath the surface. Canned fruit cocktail appeared at holiday desserts as the affordable finale that nobody questioned and everyone quietly enjoyed without complaint. The chunky mix of peaches, pears, grapes, and those mysterious bright red cherries floated in thick syrup that tasted sweeter than any fresh fruit could ever manage. Mothers spooned it into bowls, sometimes topped with a dollop of whipped cream from a pressurized can or a scoop of vanilla ice cream that slowly melted into the syrup below. Kids loved the treasure hunt aspect of finding their favorite fruit pieces, pushing aside the pears to reach the cherries or saving the grapes for last. Fresh fruit was expensive and spoiled quickly, especially during winter months when options at the grocery store were severely limited. Canned fruit cocktails solved both problems, sitting on pantry shelves indefinitely until someone decided it was time for dessert. It showed up in Jell-O molds, layered parfaits, and simple bowls passed around the table after the main meal ended. The fruit was soft, the syrup was sweet, and the memories of scraping the last pieces from the bowl still linger warmly for anyone who grew up with this humble dessert. Saffrole-flavored sassafras products gave root beer, candies, and herbal teas their distinctive taste throughout the 1980s, the natural compound extracted from the bark and roots of the sassafras tree. The flavor was unmistakable, earthy and sweet with a complexity that artificial flavorings struggled to replicate. Families drank traditional root beer, brewed sassafras tea, and enjoyed candies flavored with the extract without any suspicion that something so natural could pose serious health risks. The ingredient had been used for centuries, lending credibility to its presence in modern foods and beverages. But laboratory studies connected saffrole to liver cancer in animals, revealing that the compound could damage DNA and promote tumor growth. Regulators moved to ban saffrole from food and beverages, forcing manufacturers to reformulate products that had relied on the natural flavoring for generations. Today, commercial root beer uses artificial sassafras flavoring that mimics the taste without the cancer risk. Those old bottles and candy wrappers represent an era when natural did not automatically mean safe, and tradition could not protect against scientific discovery. Before you go, tell us in the comments which forgotten 80s item hit you hardest. Tap like if this journey stirred something you thought was lost, and subscribe so you never miss another trip back to the decade that made us.